Chapter 964. Ha! What did you say?
Kun Sa slammed the wooden table in front of him, his face full of anger.
What the hell is going on? How can there be the 5-star army in front of us? Weren't they heavily injured by General Keegan? I don't know. Wu Liji shook his head. This time, he was not lying. He really did not know anything. As soon as the army came out, they bumped into the new army of heavy cavalry. Their equipment and combat power were not as good as the enemy's, so they were defeated in just one confrontation. How could they figure out what happened? Fortunately, Wu Liji did not need to explain anything. Scouts poured into the tent one by one. General, we found enemies on the left side of the army.
General, we found enemies on the right side of the army.
General, we found enemies on the right side of the army. What? What's going on? Where did so many enemies come from? Can anyone explain to me? With a face full of anger, Kun Sa slammed the wooden table in front of him several times. The wooden table was on the verge of collapse, as if it would collapse at any time. Following this shout, the tent was so silent that even a pin drop could be heard. Obviously, no one knew how to answer this question. This result was completely different from what they had expected, and it made them unable to think for a while. But the truth would answer everything. A flaming arrow suddenly shot into the main tent, and the flames rose. Soon, the tent was burned to a crisp, and the temperature in the main tent rose. Wu Liji also shouted, "Not good, the 5-star army is coming. General, quickly give the order to retreat." Retreat? Yes, retreat. After a moment of shock, Kun Sa gave the order to retreat. At this moment, he did not have time to think about why there were so many 5-star army in his camp. Now, he only thought about how to escape and save his life. 2 red signal flares were fired into the sky. Originally, only the 5-star army had entered the barracks. However, not long after, the 5-star army appeared from all directions. They held fire arrows and set fire to the barracks one after another, causing the horses to whine incessantly. Many of the cavalrymen in the Ili army couldn't even get on their horses. They were either shot to death, burned to death, killed, or captured. Fortunately, it was night time. Kun Sa and Wu Liji led 5,000 cavalrymen and charged in one direction. Eventually, they managed to force their way out. After losing 2,000 cavalrymen, they managed to break through the encirclement of the light cavalry regiment. The light cavalry regiment had always been known for their speed. Frontal clashes on the battlefield were not their forte. In the end, Commander Ma Xiangshan could only watch the enemy retreat and sigh loudly. The massacre in the barracks was still ongoing. The results of the new army's training in the past 2 years were proven on the battlefield. The soldiers raised their sabers, waved their arms, and demonstrated what they had learned in their daily training. They treated the living enemy cavalrymen in front of them as scarecrows on the training ground, repeatedly cutting them down. These new soldiers who had joined the battlefield in the past 2 years were already qualified in terms of organization, discipline, and individual qualities. Now, they only lacked actual combat experience to kill the enemy and see more blood. Tonight's battle made up for their shortcomings and gave them the opportunity to grow into qualified and even excellent soldiers. The battle lasted until noon the next day, and the Ili army was completely defeated. In this battle, they killed more than 6,000 enemies and captured more than 20,000 enemies. The new army's actual actions once again made a great contribution, and their reputation spread far and wide. Poor Kun Sa came with 30,000 soldiers, but when he escaped, he only had 3,000. Other than the war horses and the sabers in his hands, he left everything behind. It could be said that he was battered and exhausted. Reality gave them a solid slap in the face, and they finally realized that the Walla's yes hen was right. The 5-star army was indeed not to be trifled with. Kun Sa led 3,000 cavalrymen and retreated like crazy. They retreated to Jianghu city, which was 300 miles away. There, they met the Walla army, who had already occupied the city. Only then did they feel relieved. When they completely relaxed, Kun Sa's anger rose again. This time, although he was defeated by the 5-star army, he was defeated by the enemy's conspiracy. The two sides did not fight face to face, and this made him very unconvinced. Therefore, after a good night's rest, he went to see the Wara leader Yes Hen in Jianghu city and expressed his intention to join the 5-star army in World War II. Compared to 6 years ago, Yeshen had become a lot more mature, especially after Tuachuo Buhua was killed by him. The aura of a superior was even stronger. In the courtyard of the former Shaojing City government office, Yeshen met with Kun Sa. When he heard that Kun Sa wanted to send troops to inflict heavy losses on the five-star army and avenge more than 20,000 of his soldiers, he did not refuse. Instead, he asked politely, "How many cavalrymen does General Kun Sa have now?" 3,000, but they are all elites, Kun Sa answered without hesitation. Oh, only 3,000 cavalrymen? I thought General Kun Sa had 300,000 cavalrymen. After chuckling coldly, he suddenly roared, "I don't care what kind of status you had in the past. Right now, you are nothing more than a small general with 3,000 cavalry. Where did you get the confidence to speak to me like this? Men, throw him out of the courtyard." Yeshen's sudden change in attitude made Kun Sa's expression very ugly. He still wanted to struggle, but more than a dozen new soldiers rushed forward and lifted him up. They carried him out of the courtyard and threw him onto the street. It was also at this moment that Kun Sa remembered Yeshen's character. This was a man who only cared about benefits and benefits. For benefits and benefits, he would even kill his own brothers at any time. Coming into contact with such a person was like asking a tiger for its skin. After being thrown out of the courtyard, Kun Sa was helped up by the soldiers waiting outside the courtyard. He then left with an angry look on his face. He left Shaojing City and went straight to the rear. He had already received news that Ili's army was coming from the direction of Ili City, which was his real home. Someone told Yeshen the news of Kun Sa's departure, but he was not moved. He had to admit that he was indeed afraid of Yang Qindong from the bottom of his heart. Unless it was necessary, he did not want to make an enemy of Yang Qindong. Kun Sa, with only 3,000 cavalrymen, wanted to ally with him. He would not do such a stupid thing. What he needed to think about now was how to drive Baiming's army out of the grasslands. For example, the nearby Sambiloquan would be his next target. Sambiloquan City. Shi Wanshan, the chief of the Xian Mansion, who had retreated in defeat, returned here with nearly 190,000 defeated soldiers. Originally, he wanted to reorganize here and then launch a counterattack to retake Jingzhou City and Shaojing City. However, he did not expect the Datong army to be defeated so quickly. He was not ready yet, and Walla's main force was already in front of him. Not only did they take over Jingzhou City and Shaojing City, which he had abandoned, but they also threatened the safety of Sambiloquan City. In other words, even if Shi Wanshan wanted to retreat now, he had to be prepared for an attack when he left Sambiloquan City. Shi Wanshan, who was originally ambitious, felt a little sad that the war had reached this stage. He hated the officials of the Imperial court, who only knew how to pursue their own interests and did not care about the overall situation. He hated the incompetence of Datong's chief of the army, Yang Hong. If he did not have such a big appetite, he would not have surrounded Chaojing City and instead thought of a way to take it down. Then, he would have been able to resist the allied forces of Walla and Ili. This would have created an opportunity for him to take down Shaojing City and reach the rear of Walla. At that time, the opportunity for the decisive battle would have arrived. But now, the defeated army had become a fact. How difficult would it be to find the same opportunity as before? Shi Wanshan seemed to be somewhat dispirited. The expressions of the two deputy commanders beside him, Gu He and Ning Wenfeng, were not much better. However, the eunuch in charge, also known as the military supervisor eunuch, Deng Chong, said in his croaky voice, "Generals, the emperor has already sent someone to deliver an 800-li urgent message. He said that the court is currently sending reinforcements. This time, with Governor Shi Hang as the leader, they will assist us and send troops to the grasslands. Our current mission is to defend San Buji River. We have to be like a nail nailed into this place. If we dare to retreat, we will be punished according to military law." After saying this, Deng Chong could not help but let out a sigh. Although he didn't know much about military affairs, he knew how difficult it was for a lone city to defend until reinforcements arrived. In history, there might be people who relied on a city and defended it for half a year or even longer. But without exception, those who defended it were all big cities with enough provisions to last them for a long time. In contrast, Sambiloquan did not have such conditions. The city walls were low, only about 20 feet high. Scaling ladders could easily be placed on top of the city walls. The provisions in the city were not sufficient,
and even the water supply was not enough to satisfy the needs of the army. Under such conditions, it would be a big problem for anyone to defend it.
Report.
While the four of them were still hesitating about what to do next, a scout suddenly came to report that 30,000 soldiers had defeated the 5-star army. The main general, Kun Sa, only managed to escape with 3,000 soldiers. When the news came out, Shi Wanshan and the other 3 generals' expressions became even more complicated. In contrast, the 5-star army had won a great battle, but they had just suffered a great defeat. This stark contrast made them even more depressed and anxious. In the silent room, the deputy chief, Ancient River, suddenly said, "The 5-star army has fully grown. Even if we can defeat the Walla and the Ili one day, how are we going to deal with the 5-star army?
Who is their opponent?" Chapter 965.
Speaking of which, Gu He could be considered a valiant general. Among the 200,000 soldiers of the Xian Mansion, even Shi Wanshan was slightly inferior to him. Usually, he was the one who shouted the loudest, as if he didn't put the heroes of the world in his eyes. But now he actually asked this question. This was enough to show that he was a little afraid. Ancient River's words made the originally quiet room seem even quieter. Shi Wanshan and Ning Wenfeng didn't say anything. They didn't know what to say or how to answer this question. Only Deng Chong the eunuch suddenly said after a moment of silence, "General Ancient, what do you mean?
Could it be that you're afraid?"
As a eunuch, he only had one person to back him up, and that was the emperor.
Anyone who disobeyed him would become his enemy.
It was only because they were on good terms that Deng Chong normally didn't dare to say such things. If it was anyone else who dared to say such things, Deng Chong probably would have already called for soldiers to arrest them.
I'm afraid? What a joke. On the battlefield, when have I not led the soldiers?
I'm just talking about something we'll have to face sooner or later. Faced with Deng Chong's question, Ancient River naturally wouldn't back down. In the face of a great enemy, if there was any internal strife, the situation in the city would be even worse. As the commander, Shi Wanshan finally opened his mouth and said, all right.
These are just private words. They can't be taken seriously.
We should think about how to deal with the current situation and how to deal with the Walla cavalry. The emperor has already said that we can't lose Sanbu Lechuan. Otherwise, we'll be punished by military law. Since it's like this, if you don't want to die, quickly come up with a plan.
It's not easy to defend.
Without enough provisions, the morale of the army will fall into chaos as time goes on. Ning Wenfeng, who was famous for being a wise man, shook his head. We can have Talu think of a way to supply us with provisions. Also, this place isn't far from Datong Prefecture. We can think of something from there.
Deng Chong also suggested.
After following Shi Wanshan for so long, he wasn't a complete novice when it came to military matters. He more or less had some common sense.
Datong Prefecture?
Hehe. Hearing this, Ning Wenfeng shook his head.
Right now, their main force has retreated to the Ningxia Guard.
They must be scared out of their wits. It's impossible for them to support us. I fear that they don't even have the courage to open the city gates. As for Tulu City, we can order them, but once we leave, there aren't that many guards left there to begin with. It's already not bad for them to be able to defend the city. They will be able to hold on. Duke Zhongdan won't let anyone take Tulu and threaten the Han people. Shi Wanshan interjected with certainty when this topic was brought up. This was also what he was not worried about. Perhaps the emperor had also seen this point. Otherwise, he would not have ordered them to defend Sambuloquan to the death. Instead, he would have ordered them to retreat to Tulu City. Regardless of how great of a threat Yang Chendong was to all sides and how fast his power rose, there was one thing that was not wrong. He had taken care of the great Ming people, or rather, the Han people. This situation was seen by everyone. Since this was the case with his temper, there was no reason for him to allow Tulu City to be attacked. On this point, even Shi Wanshan was full of admiration for him. When it came to Yang Chendong, Ancient River interjected, "Hey, do you guys think we can have someone send a letter to the Duke of Loyalty and ask them to transport supplies for us? Others might be afraid of the Walla and Ili allied forces, but the 5-star army shouldn't be afraid."
Is that okay?
The 5-star army doesn't have many troops in Origin City. Do they have this kind of ability? Deng Chong also heard the interest and asked.
Don't think about it. It's impossible. Ning Wenfeng refuted.
Afraid that the two would not believe him, he then explained, "Everyone is not stupid. We should be able to see the ambition of the Duke of Loyalty. In the future, there will be a day when we will become enemies. Since we are enemies, it would be good if they don't step on us when we are in dire straits.
How can they support us? Besides, do we have money to pay them?
If I remember correctly, the Emperor still owes the Duke of Loyalty 11 million taels of silver." As Ning Wenfeng spoke, the expressions of Shi Wanshan and the others constantly changed. Especially the eunuch Deng Chong. His expression was very unsightly. After all, his master owed the other party money and was not firm in his words. He was only a small chess piece in his master's eyes. What else could he say? The four of them sat for an entire afternoon and still couldn't come up with a better idea. In the end, Shi Wanshan could only say, "Forget it. It's a blessing, not a curse. Let's just hand over the problem. Since the Emperor wants us to guard here, there are some things that can be solved with help. Otherwise, we can't blame anyone if we can't defend the city. By the way, I have to trouble Eunuch Deng with this matter. You know the situation in the city. The army can only eat for 20 days at most. After 20 days, I'm afraid the city will collapse. This eunuch knows. I will go back and write a secret report to the Emperor." Deng Chong said seriously. This was no longer a matter of whether or not he could complete the task. It was related to his own life. He couldn't help but take it seriously. First city. Yang Mansion. The new army had won another great battle, killing and capturing nearly 30,000 enemies. The news of victory was sent to Yang Chendong. He just glanced at it and put it aside. This was within his expectations. If the new army couldn't defeat the enemy, then it wouldn't be called the new army. Ili underestimated the enemy, so it was only a matter of time before they were defeated. He wasn't worried. What he needed to consider now was the changing situation in front of him and what he needed to do. For example, what kind of changes would happen to the situation on the battlefield? Yang Chendong was a person who liked to take 3 steps at a time. This time, the sudden appearance of Ili's cavalry was beyond his expectation. It was also not within his plan. However, since they had appeared, of course, he wouldn't be polite. That was why he ordered the new army to attack. Facts proved that they won this battle without any suspense. However, this didn't mean that there was no problem. On the contrary, what Ili would do next was a problem that he needed to consider. Only by estimating all the possibilities and making preparations could they ensure that the 5-star army would be able to face everything safely during the mission. All along, Yang Chendong had been doing this. Every battle under his command didn't seem to require much effort or danger. However, this was the result of his careful calculations and strategies. Otherwise, even if he had weapons that were a few hundred years ahead of this era, he wouldn't be able to achieve such great results in such a short time. Then the problem appeared. What would Ili do next? Would he choose to swallow this loss silently or send out a large number of troops for revenge? 4 years ago, he left Baiming's capital in the name of returning to his hometown to pay respects to his ancestors. He left to help the southern Ming Empire deal with the Yellow Bandits. Since then, he had started his own journey. The only difference was that the farmers earned grain, the merchants earned money, and the politicians earned reputation. What he earned was merely a country. To build a country, it wasn't as simple as fighting and killing. Wasn't there an old saying that went, "It's easy to conquer the world, but hard to defend the world"? How to manage these territories well and use them well was the time to show one's true ability. Fortunately, with the experience of the later generations and some of the goods in the warehouse, he was able to create a lot of value. With money, it was easy to do things, and the territory he conquered was stable. But after all, his foundation was too weak, so the local management couldn't keep up with the pace of his expansion. Just like now, he could command his troops and had the ability to conquer more territory, but how to defend it had become a big problem. For example, the territory in front of him wasn't small, and it was vast but sparsely populated. Once he defeated the enemy's main cavalry, it wouldn't be difficult to occupy it. Similarly, because the territory was vast but sparsely populated, the number of civilians needed was really difficult for him. In other words, he had the ability to defeat the enemy, but he didn't have the strength to occupy the enemy. Even so, now was the time to occupy Ili,
which meant that it wasn't the time to fight the enemy. Sigh, I used a lot of effort to defeat the enemy, but I can't ask for any benefits. It's really not interesting. With a sigh, Yang Chendong called Beta Persei. He wanted to send a message to the Ma Bei army thousands of miles away and ask them to do something. Yang Chendong was calculating.
He needed time to accumulate enough strength, such as excellent management personnel after occupying a piece of land, the people who needed to move in and out, the development of this area in the future, what kind of factory to build, what kind of sunshine to point to for the people, and so on.
Like him, Baiming was also calculating. In the capital of Baiming, the ministers reached a consensus at the court meeting. Sanbu Luchuan must be defended. Only in this way could they give Governor Shi Heng enough time to prepare for a big battle with Walla on the grassland and win the final victory. The consensus was reached, but the situation in Sanbu Luchuan was there. The city was not big, the city walls were not high, and the food and water stored inside were very limited. With such a medium-sized city, it was impossible to stop the combined forces of Walla and Nili Ali. Commander Shi is a general who can fight. The Battle of Xianmansion and the Battle of Tulu City have proven his ability. Now he has nearly 200,000 troops in his hands. As long as the provisions can keep up, there shouldn't be a problem to defend the city. At the court meeting, Minister of War Yi Ming stood up and expressed his opinion. Yi Ming's words attracted the silent support of many other ministers. But then Minister of Works Shi Pu stood up. Minister Yi is right, but the key problem is how to guarantee the provision on time. Chapter 966. Yes. Where is Minister Jean?
How are the preparations for General Shi's army of 200,000 going?
Sitting on the golden dragon throne, Zhu Qiyu nodded. His gaze turned toward the Minister of Appointments. Jean Lian stood in the group of officials.
Hearing Dai Zong call out his name, he immediately stepped forward with a board in his hand and said, "Your Majesty, the provisions have already been transported to the Xian Manor.
According to what I know, a portion of the provisions will move with the army. A portion of the provisions need to be transported to the front lines once every 3 to 5 days. Based on this, most of the provisions should still be in the Xian Manor. Then send it over." Hearing that the provisions had already been prepared, Zhu Qiyu's face was filled with joy.
However, after saying this, he realized that the entire hall had suddenly fallen silent. It was as if there was something wrong with what he had said.
Fortunately, there were some officials who were good at understanding people's hearts. Minister of Justice Su Yozhen stepped forward and said, "Your Majesty, the difficulty right now is that the provisions can't be transported up. Presumably, the area around Sanbu Luchuan should be filled with Yeshen's cavalry. If we send them up now, it's no different from sending sheep into a tiger's den." Yes. Zhu Qiyu's face turned bright red. Although he had already been the emperor for 6 years, he had never been on the battlefield. His understanding of war was only from what he read in books. After Su Yozhen's reminder, he knew that what he had just said was a bit too hasty. His face turned red. In order to eliminate the effects of what had just happened, he thought of a way to divert everyone's attention.
He looked at Shi Heng in the group of generals and said, "Governor Shi, when will the newly gathered 200,000 soldiers be gathered and sent to the battlefield?"
"Your Majesty." Shi Heng bowed and said, "The gathering time will take around 15 days. After all, 200,000 people is not a small number. As for when they will be able to reach the battlefield, if they rely on their legs, it will probably take another 1.5 months to reach Sanbu Luchuan. However, if I work hard, 2 months should be enough." 2 months? This answer caused the officials who were participating in the court meeting to whisper to each other and discuss spiritedly. If it really took 2 months, Sanbuchuan might really fall. If that was the case, the 200,000 soldiers in the city would be devoured. This would undoubtedly be a heavy blow to Baiming's military strength. On the dragon throne, Zhu Qiyu shook her head. "I'm afraid 2 months won't be enough. How about this? If anyone has any way to transport the provisions to Sanbu Luchuan, feel free to share it." This? The ministers couldn't help but shake their heads like rattle drums. To break through the formation of the Walla cavalry and transport so much grain into the city, there was only one word to describe it: difficult. After waiting for a long time, no one came forward to provide advice. This made Zhu Qiyu very angry. Normally, all of them would claim to be patriotic ministers and would love to dig out their hearts for him to see.
Or perhaps he was more capable than Guanzhong and Yu Yi. However, when faced with a difficult problem, all they did was shake their heads. How could Zhu Qiyu not be disappointed? After a while of discussion, the hall became quiet again. It was clear that no one had thought of a better idea. Seeing the reaction of the ministers and thinking about the fiery military situation ahead, Zhu Qiyu couldn't help but get angry. She slammed her hand on the dragon table and asked loudly, "My dear ministers, you are all the smartest and most capable people in the world. Don't tell me that even you don't have a better idea?" These words made the old ministers blush. However, there were some thick-skinned ones whose faces didn't change. To them, what they learned was how to govern the world and how to govern the country with benevolence and righteousness. It wasn't some military book. It had to be said that this was the so-called Confucianism. It was just a theory within a theory. The more one read, the better one could write some good articles. This was also the use of it. They could pass the Imperial examinations and obtain the qualifications to become an official. Then, they would slowly waste their time and accumulate experience. Finally, they would become the so-called minister who governed the country. With such people, it was no wonder that the common people lived in an abyss of suffering. The hall was still silent. Zhu Qiyu's expression became more and more unsightly. He once again felt a sense of isolation and helplessness. He once again understood what it meant to regret not having enough help when it was time to use it. In the moment of silence, a voice suddenly sounded. Dressed in a second-rank official's robe, Minister of Justice Su Yozhen stepped out of his office and said, "Your Majesty, actually, if you want to transport provisions to Sanbuchuan City, it isn't that troublesome. As long as one person is willing to agree, this matter is simple." Someone stepped out. This already made Zhu Qiyu very happy. The person who stepped out even thought of a solution. Zhu Qiyu immediately asked, "Beloved Minister Su, do you have a good idea? Quickly say it." Among the officials, the Minister of Rights, Hu Xiao, had been standing there with his eyes closed. When he saw Su Yozhen step out, his originally unconcerned expression instantly changed. His brows couldn't help but furrow together, but then slowly relax. Yang Qindong had already told him that Su Yozhen was also a person of the same path. However, in these past few years, the two didn't have much contact. Perhaps it was because they didn't feel at ease with each other. They only silently cooperated with each other on some matters. If they could cooperate, they would also silently support each other in private. Hu Xiao naturally understood Su Yozhen a little. He was smart, discerning, able to see the situation clearly, and had smooth and slick methods. However, him stepping out at this time was still out of Hu Xiao's expectations. He had already guessed what this person wanted to say. However, was it really good to involve Yang Qindong in this matter? The opponent this time was the allied cavalry of the Walla cavalry and the Ili cavalry. Did the five-star army really have the strength to stop them? However, with Su Yozhen's personality, he rarely fought a battle that he wasn't confident in. Could it be that he had received Yang Qindong's secret order and wanted to take the initiative to participate in such a big event to share some benefits? Or was it all his own idea? While Hu Xiao was still guessing, Su Yozhen had already stepped out. He crossed his arms and said, "Your Majesty, if you want to resolve the situation, the only way is to ask the Duke of Loyalty. There is no other way." The Duke of Loyalty? Zhu Qiyu, who was sitting on the dragon throne, originally had a face full of expectation. At this moment, his expression became somewhat ugly. It was unknown when it started, but in the court of Baiming, the words Duke of Loyalty had become a taboo. If it wasn't necessary, no one would mention it. Perhaps everyone knew that this person's influence was so great that it threatened the survival and development of Baiming. However, this person's influence had already reached a certain level. He was no longer someone that could be casually suppressed. Since there was no way to deal with him, it was better not to mention him. This could be considered as out of sight, out of mind. But now, Su Yozhen had broken this rule and took the initiative to mention him. An extremely clear expression of displeasure flashed across Dai Zong's face. The Duke of Loyalty? How could he have such an ability? Zhu Qiyu's voice carried a trace of dissatisfaction. Listen to the sound of gongs and drums. The ability of the officials to observe people's expressions was not small. Seeing that the emperor was a bit angry, the smartest thing to do was to immediately stop this topic. However, Su Yozhen had no way out now. Ever since Yang Qindong appeared in the capital of Baiming and saw him at night, Su Yozhen, who had been wavering, knew that he had already boarded Xianxia's ship. It was likely that it would be impossible for him to get off. The only thing he could do was to think of a way to prevent this ship from sinking in the sea and find a way to sail further. After understanding this in his heart, he took the initiative to cooperate with Xianxia. For example, when the Five-Star Army attacked North Korea, many of the officials in the court criticized the Five-Star Army for attacking a vassal state of the Ming dynasty. This was clearly a form of disrespect to the Ming dynasty. Not only did he not make a fuss with these people, he even privately found the Daizong emperor and said that North Korea was not part of the Ming dynasty. Even if it was taken away, there was no real loss. It would be better to use this opportunity to ask the Five-Star Army for some warhorses. After all, strength was the way of the king. As long as he had enough strength, he could take back what he lost sooner or later. It was Su Yozhen who came up with this idea. He originally wanted to reprimand the Five-Star Army, and even the Daizong emperor who sent troops from Liaodong to support North Korea. He thought that compared to the vassal state being captured, it was more important to strengthen oneself. After all, North Korea was not the first vassal state to be captured. Zhu Qiyu agreed, and Su Yozhen joined forces with some courtiers who were on good terms with him. In the end, when they finally took down the Joseon dynasty, Yang Qindong only had to pay the price of 50,000 warhorses. Moreover, it wasn't for free. It was a loan to the Northern Ming dynasty, which had to be converted into silver and returned in the future. Of course he owed too much. It was hard to say whether he could pay it back, but at least he owed money in name. The Five-Star Army actually captured North Korea in such a short period of time. This matter also made Su Yozhen have a further understanding of Yang Qindong's strength and understanding. After all, it was just some small countries in the south. It could be said that the barren land was occupied, and its influence was far from being so big. Then how powerful was the Five-Star Army? Su Yozhen had an idea. If possible, he wanted to go to the grassland's first city to take a look. He wanted to see what kind of scale Xianxia's development had reached. If he wanted to go, he needed a dignified reason. Now that Sanbuchuan was surrounded and in danger, he saw this as an opportunity. Su Yozhen stood up and spoke to the emperor. There was another reason why Su Yozhen had the courage to stand up. He believed that Yang Qindong did not want to see the 200,000 Baiming soldiers in Sanbuchuan get eaten by the grassland's foreign tribes. It was to cater to this idea that he chose to take the initiative to attack. Chapter 967. Your Majesty, Sanbulachuan is not far from the first city. Since the Duke of Zhongwei can gain a foothold there, he must have military strength as his backing. If we can ask him to help, it shouldn't be a big problem for him to only transport grain and not help in the war. Su Yozhen stood up and said in a guessing tone. The important thing was that he emphasized one thing, which was that Yang Qindong would not help Baiming. He would only help to transport the grain. He said this in order to stop Zhu Qiyu's mouth and make things clear first. It might be possible to help transport the grain, but helping Baiming to fight the Wara was not worth mentioning. Because this was not Yang Qindong's intention. Originally, when Zhu Qiyu heard Yang Qindong's name, he had such an idea and asked the Duke of Zhongwei to send troops to help. Your title was given to you by the Great Ming Dynasty. Now that the Great Ming Dynasty was in trouble, it was not too much to ask for your troops. But when he heard Su Yozhen's words, he knew that he might have thought too much. However, he still wanted to try harder. After all, if Yang Qindong was really willing to participate in the war, whether they could win the war or not, at least they could get someone to share the firepower. But before Zhu Qiyu could speak, Governor Shihang had already stood up. He cupped his fist and said, Your Majesty, Minister Su's words are very reasonable. The Duke of Zhongwei can help us transport the grain. As long as we defend Sanbulachuan for 2 months, our army will arrive. At that time, the situation will be completely one-sided. At that time, our army's victory will be expected, and our Baiming army will not need any help. Shihang suddenly stood up, not because he had discussed it with Su Yozhen in advance. He just didn't want Yang Qindong to take advantage of it. In his eyes, Baiming's army was powerful and invincible. One day, even the Duke of Zhongwei and his 5-star army would be trampled under his feet. But if he owed the other side a big favor now, how could he fight the war in the future? Shihang was looking at things from a long-term perspective, which was why he said those words. As the main representative of the military, Zhu Qiyu knew that it was impossible to ask the Duke of Loyalty to send troops to participate in the battle. He could only nod his head and say, "All right, since that's the case, Minister Su, in your opinion, who should be sent to the Duke of Loyalty and Courage?" As he spoke, Zhu Qiyu's gaze swept across the group of courtiers. Unfortunately, many of the officials did not even raise their heads. In their hearts, asking for help from the Duke of Loyalty was not a good task. "Your Majesty, this idea was thought of by this subject, so this subject is naturally willing to go." Su Yozhen wanted to take this opportunity to test Yang Qindong's strength. Naturally, she wanted to go. Since the other courtiers were unwilling to go, it saved him a lot of effort and he didn't have to worry about anyone competing with him. It was Su Yozhen who took the initiative to step forward. Zhu Qiyu was overjoyed. Thinking of seeing a loyal official in a time of danger, he couldn't help but value Su Yozhen more. Thinking that this person had been promoted by him after he ascended to the throne, perhaps there would be a chance to put her in an important position. Immediately, he announced Su Yozhen as an imperial envoy to go to Shi City to discuss with the Duke of Loyalty and Courage the matter of assisting Sanbulachuan City with provisions. For the sake of convenience, he gave Su Yozhen the power to act and the power to mobilize the soldiers of Xianfu. Su Yozhen immediately knelt on the ground and shouted, "Long live the Emperor!" Zhu Qiyu, who was very satisfied, was even happier. He nodded lightly at Jining, who was standing to the side with her back bent. The chief eunuch immediately understood and shouted loudly, "Court is dismissed. Minister Su, please stay. His Majesty wants to see you." The other courtiers left after shouting, "Long live the Emperor." Su Yozhen walked straight to the back of the palace and ran into the chief eunuch Jining, who had come to greet him. The other chuckled and said in a congratulatory tone, "Congratulations to Minister Su for becoming an imperial envoy." "Ah, Jin Gonggong, what are you saying? We are all working for His Majesty. There is no need to mention any congratulations. It should be the same." Su Yozhen also had a smile on his face. As he spoke, a banknote of 1,000 taels of silver was passed from his hand to Jin Ying's hand without anyone noticing. His gaze turned slightly. After glancing at the banknote in his hand, Jin Ying's expression became even more joyful. "Minister Su is truly a pillar of the country. Don't worry. Since Minister Su has the heart, this Gonggong will naturally help where it is necessary." Many thanks, many thanks." Su Yozhen cupped his hands in thanks. The two of them walked almost side by side to the back of the palace. Zhu Qiyu had been waiting in the palace for a long time. When he saw Su Yozhen come, he couldn't hide the joy in the corners of his eyes. When all the courtiers were at their wits' end, this person could stand up and find a way to solve the problem. He was also willing to bravely take on the heavy burden. Based on these, he should value him more. "Someone, give Minister Su a seat. This official doesn't dare." Su Yozhen immediately revealed a look of fear and trepidation. Speaking of which, this was the first time he was given a seat when he met with the Emperor in private. "Ah, Minister Su, this is His Majesty's good intentions. You were able to stand up in times of danger. This seat must be given." Jining, who had just received the banknote, immediately stood up and spoke to smooth things over. Su Yozhen, who had been polite to begin with, immediately revealed a very grateful expression. The rims of his eyes even reddened. It was as if he was about to shed tears of gratitude. He said, "This official thanks His Majesty." "Many thanks, His Majesty." Su Yozhen's buttocks sat down on the chair. What followed was naturally a scene of the monarch and his courtier chatting happily. "Minister Su, this time, you were able to take the initiative to stand up, come up with an idea, and accept this task. Zhan is very comforted. However, how confident are you that you will be able to persuade the Duke of Loyal Courage to transport the provisions for our army?" Zhu Qiyu's eyes were filled with anticipation as he asked. Although Su Yozhen was sitting on the chair, he still had a look of fear and trepidation. Seeing the Emperor ask, he quickly replied, "In reply to His Majesty, about 50%? 50%? Only that much?" Zhu Qiyu's brows furrowed. He was clearly a bit dissatisfied. If that was the case, wouldn't it be very likely that he would be rejected? If that was the case, then as the Emperor, his order was actually rejected by a subordinate. This was not a dignified thing to do. Even as the emperor, he cared a lot about face. Or perhaps he knew that he couldn't do it and still did it, so it was better not to do it. At least if he lost, his face would still be there. This was better than losing everything and being laughed at in private. Su Yozhen had been paying attention to the changes in Zhu Qiyu's expression. When he saw that the emperor was displeased, he quickly said, "Your Majesty, although the Duke of Loyal Courage doesn't need to participate in the battle this time, transporting the provisions to the heavily surrounded Sanbu-Lushuan city is no different from going to the battlefield. This official really doesn't have 100% confidence that I can persuade the Duke of Loyal Courage. Moreover, you also know that this official and the Duke of Loyal Courage have never gotten along. In the past, this official has even participated in a memorial to him. Speaking of which, this official really isn't a good persuader. If possible, could your Majesty consider sending someone else?" Retreating in order to advance was what Su Yozhen wanted to express. He was prepared to make a request. If he couldn't take the initiative in his hands, how could this request be discussed? Zhu Qiyu naturally knew about the discord between Su Yozhen and Yang Chendong. This was also the important reason why he was relieved to promote this person. This time, when he was sent to the beginning city, he didn't have to worry about the two colluding. This was also the reason why he agreed to let the other party be the Imperial envoy so quickly. Now that he heard that Su Yozhen wanted to shirk the responsibility, how could Zhu Qiyu be willing to let it go? He immediately said, "Dear official Su, what do you mean? Zhan has just issued a decree in front of all the civil and military officials. How can I casually take it back? Zhen thinks that you should go. If you have any requests, you can make them now. As long as the Duke of Loyal Courage can help transport the provisions, any conditions can be discussed." Zhu Qiyu also had no other choice. Not only was he optimistic that Su Yozhen was a suitable candidate, but the important thing was that the other court officials didn't have the intention to go. Even though he was the emperor and could make a decision at will, no one dared to refuse when he asked the court officials to go. But what good result could there be if they were forced? If they messed up the task, then there would be no medicine for regret. On the other hand, Su Yozhen was the one who came up with the idea, thought of the method, and recommended himself to go. Presumably, he was mentally prepared. There was no need to give up a suitable candidate and use someone else. Zhu Qiyu agreed to raise conditions and requests. Su Yozhen was waiting for this sentence. He immediately stood up, clasped his fist, and said with an incomparably solemn expression, "I have a way to guarantee that the Duke of Loyal Courage will send troops to transport the provisions." "Guarantee? Are you 100% sure?" Zhu Qiyu's eyes lit up as he asked. "Yes, 100% sure," Su Yozhen said with a tone that said he was going all out. "Okay, tell me." Zhu Qiyu didn't agree in a hot-headed manner. Instead, he wanted to hear what the request was first. It was enough to see that after being the emperor for a few years, he had learned to be calm and had learned to leave a trick up his sleeve. With a conflicted expression, Su Yozhen didn't immediately reply. He knelt on the ground with a plop and said, "Emperor, I have no selfish motives for what I am about to say. It is only for the sake of Baiming's strength and future. I ask for Emperor's forgiveness for what I have said." "Beloved official Su, what do you mean? This is a meeting between us ruler and official, not a court discussion. If you have anything to say, just say it. Zhen will forgive you," Zhu Qiyu said. "Many thanks, Your Majesty. That being the case, this subject's only request is for Your Majesty to grant Duke Zhongdan the title of Great Bright Prince. With this request, this subject can guarantee that Duke Zhongdan will be of use to us and dispatch troops to transport grain." Kneeling on the ground, Su Yozhen saw that the time was right and said what he had prepared to say. Although Zhu Qiyu had made some preparations, he knew that he had to pay a price if he wanted to reach 100% from 50%. But when he heard Su Yozhen's request, he still couldn't hide the anger on his face. What, grant the title of king? How is that possible? Zhu Qiyu couldn't be blamed for being so angry. Since the Great Ming Dynasty's Emperor Taizu, the Great Ming Dynasty had stopped granting titles to people with different surnames. How could this rule be easily broken by him? Su Yozhen's proposal was too absurd. Chapter 968. Zhu Qiyu was angry, but Su Yozhen was not afraid. The current situation did not allow Dai Zong to make any other choice. If he could not make this request now, it would be even harder to find an opportunity in the future. Thus, he did not immediately speak. Instead, he looked at Jining beside Zhu Qiyu. Since he had taken his money, it was time for him to speak up for him. Jining, who had only taken 1,000 taels of silver, was furious. Originally, he thought that Su Yozhen was going to be put in an important position. It would be beneficial for him to have a good relationship with him. In addition, there was money to be taken. Wasn't this the best of both worlds? But now, this daring Su Yozhen actually proposed to make Yang Chendong Wang. This was something the emperor would never agree to. How did he have the guts to say this? It was only 1,000 taels of silver. It was impossible to order him to do such a big thing. At this moment, he kept his mouth tightly shut. He had even thought of returning the 1,000 taels of silver to Su Yozhen when he sent her out. The emperor did not speak. Jining also did not speak. Su Yozhen simply knelt on the ground and did not speak. For a moment, the rear hall was silent. You could hear a pin drop. After a full quarter of an hour, Zhu Qiyu saw that Su Yozhen did not speak. He did not admit his mistake and did not take back his request. He couldn't help but say angrily, "Beloved official Su, your suggestion is not acceptable. You should change your request." "Yes, then please take off this official's Imperial envoy hat and send this official to prison," Su Yozhen said without backing down. "Prison?" Zhu Qiyu's eyes widened. "Yes, without this condition, this official cannot convince the Duke of loyalty. Since this is the case, it is better not to go this time. Your Majesty can use this time to think of other methods. The lives of 200,000 soldiers cannot wait for long, Your Majesty." Su Yozhen spoke as if there was no other way. In the end, he did not forget to threaten with the lives of 200,000 Baiming soldiers. Hearing the threat, Zhu Qiyu immediately stood up from the dragon throne and said angrily, "Is there no other way other than this? This subject is slow-witted and cannot think of a better way." Su Yozhen simply knelt on the ground and said without even raising his head. He knew that this was a risky move, but if he succeeded, the return would be worth it. If he could help Yang Chendong ascend to the throne, his achievements would naturally not be small. In the future, when the 5-star army was formed, he would be able to take the opportunity to obtain more benefits. "You!" Seeing that Su Yozhen had no intention of backing down, Zhu Qiyu was so angry that his entire body was trembling. He had thought that this person had come up with a good plan. It turned out that she wanted to confer the title of king on Yang Chendong. That being the case, it was not impossible for anyone to take this decision to force Yang Chendong to transport grain, or even to send troops. To the side, Jining hadn't thought that the situation would be in such a deadlock. Seeing the emperor's dragon countenance grow angry, she immediately urged, "Your Majesty, please calm down. Your Majesty, please calm down. You must not harm your body over such a small matter. If Your Majesty believes this subject, please go to the back of the hall to rest. This subject and Minister Su will have a good discussion." "Fine, it is impossible to confer the title of king. This matter must be completed. Minister Jin, do as you see fit." Zhu Qiyu really wanted to punish Su Yozhen, but he was worried that other than this person, no one else would be willing to step forward to solve the problem. He could only take a step back and see what the head eunuch beside him had to do. Zhu Qiyu left angrily. When only Su Xianxia and Jining were left in the hall, Su Yozhen slowly and unhurriedly stood up. She even casually patted the dust off her knees. There was not a trace of panic or nervousness on her face. Su Yozhen had originally thought that he had angered the emperor and was already in a state of fear and trepidation. Unexpectedly, he was not afraid at all and even had the time to put on an act. Jining was also angry and said, "Minister Su, you've gone too far. You've gone too far." Ha! Su Yozhen did not show any fear because of the other's anger. On the contrary, he smiled and said, "Jin Gonggong, do you think we have a choice right now? On one hand is the lives of 200,000 Baiming soldiers. On the other hand, it is only the title of king. I think Jin Gonggong can distinguish which is more important." The emperor clearly will not confer the title of king. How could Jining not know the importance of this matter? But when he thought of Zhu Qiyu's attitude, he still spoke truthfully. 50,000 taels. After this matter is completed,
I will tell Duke of Zhongdang what Jin Gonggong has done. I think he will be able to take out 50,000 taels. Su Yozhen did not wait for Jining to continue speaking and had already given a good price. This price stunned Jining.
Then he said with a suspicious expression, "Could it be that Minister Su is one of Duke of Zhongdang's people?" Haha, what a joke. Su Yozhen's expression did not change and his heart did not skip a beat.
Everyone knows what I have done to Duke of Zhongdang in the past. How could I be one of his people? This minister only thinks that this should be what Duke of Zhongdang wants. When the time comes, taking the opportunity to ask for some silver taels should not be excessive. Duke of Zhongdang is rich. I think many people know this. This explanation temporarily dispelled Jin Ying's misgivings. When he thought about it, it was true. Yang Chendong had wanted the title of king for a long time. This was something everyone knew. Su Yozhen was just using his title.
But when he thought of the emperor's angry expression just now, he said inwardly, "The matter of being conferred the title of king is not a child's play. I'm afraid the emperor will not agree so easily."
100,000 taels. Once again, Su Yozhen took the initiative to raise the price.
This time, there was a trace of seriousness in her tone. "This is already the upper limit.
I'm afraid that even if this minister personally makes a move, I can only obtain this from Duke Zhongdan. I have given my own share to Duke Gong. If it really doesn't work, then there is no need to discuss anymore. If the emperor is angry at me because of this, then this minister will accept it.
Once I leave the palace, I will go to the prison and not trouble others."
The benefits doubled again, reaching 100,000 taels of silver. Jin Ying, who had already been moved, was completely defeated by the money. His expression changed again and again. He thought to himself, it was just conferring Yang Chendong the title of king with a different surname. It was not like he was handing over the country to him. He could get 100,000 taels of silver. That was half of his wealth. At the same time, he could solve the emperor's problem.
Why not?
Jin Ying did not immediately speak. After Su Yozhen saw this, he knew there was a chance. He continued, "The matter of conferring a title of king with a different surname has already been broken by the southern Ming sect. We, Bai Ming, are just following suit. It is not much. Besides, even if it is a title of king, we can still do something about it." What is there to do? Jin Ying was interested. Although he was someone Zhu Qiyu trusted very much, if he wanted to convince the other on such a big matter, he needed a good reason. Su Yozhen knew this meant that Jin Ying had agreed. Now, it was time to solve the problem from a practical point of view. He immediately said what he was thinking. Jin Gonggong, since ancient times, the title of king has been given based on the fief. Then, we can give the Duke of Loyalty the title of Bugnam of Gojoseon. This is equivalent to us giving him the fief of the southern wastelands. At that time, the one who will have a headache will be Ying sect. What loss will we have?
Bugnam of Gojoseon.
Hearing this title, Jin Ying could imagine how angry the southern Ming emperor would be after this matter. He might even be furious.
This should be what the emperor wanted to see. He could vent the emperor's anger and resolve the crisis in front of him.
He could even get 100,000 taels of silver. No matter how he looked at it, this was a suitable transaction. At this moment, a smile appeared on his face. Then, he and Su Yozhen burst out laughing together. After Jin Ying was convinced, he turned and walked towards the back of the hall. He didn't know what method he used. Perhaps Zhu Qiyu just wanted a way out. In any case, an hour later, Su Yozhen waited for Jin Ying, who was holding the Imperial edict. "Minister Su, the emperor is wise and decisive. He has already agreed to confer the title of Bugnam of Gojoseon to the Duke of Loyalty. This is the Imperial edict." Jin Ying raised the Imperial edict in his hand with a proud expression. "Jin Gonggong is very capable." Su Yozhen gave him a thumbs up and sincerely praised him. Such an important matter as being conferred the title of prince was actually done by a single eunuch. It had to be said that the power of the eunuchs was truly heaven-defying. Just as Su Yozhen was about to reach out and take the Imperial edict, Jin Ying suddenly put the edict behind his back and said, "Minister Su, it is too late. The emperor has another request. This time, all of the grain needed in Sanbuchuan City will be provided by the Duke of Loyalty. This shouldn't be a problem, right?"
He didn't expect that Dai Zong would want to take advantage of such a small matter. He didn't have the bearing of a great nation at all. However, when he thought about how Xianxia's power could sell grain to the southern Ming at a fair price, he thought that there shouldn't be a lack of grain. This shouldn't be a problem. He made the decision to agree. All right. When will we be able to get the 100,000 taels of silver? Jining put forward her second request first before her personal one. Su Yozhen cursed the other for being greedy in his heart. He didn't think that he wasn't much better. However, at this moment, he still explained, Jin Gonggong, I haven't even seen the Duke of Loyalty. Where will I get the silver to pay? However, please don't worry. Since I have agreed, I will naturally do it. When I return from the origin city, it will be the day that the silver will be presented. If I don't fulfill my promise, with Jin Gonggong's power in the embroidered uniform guard, it won't be difficult to imprison me. Haha, Minister Su, what are you saying? I was just joking just now. After getting the answer he wanted, Jining immediately laughed and handed the Imperial Edict to Su Yozhen. Minister Su, when Sanbuchuan City is rescued, it will be the time when the Emperor will personally announce the Imperial Edict to the world. This Imperial Edict will be enough to reassure the Duke of Loyalty. The moment Jining handed over the Imperial Edict, he also mentioned the time when the Imperial Edict would be announced. Chapter 969. Good. Su Yozhen looked at the Imperial Edict carefully, and after finding that there were no problems, he was overjoyed. With this Imperial Edict, he had made a great contribution. With this contribution, his position in the Xianxia would be secured. After all the officials left, Su Yozhen returned to his residence in the capital when it was almost dark. Then, he ordered people to prepare his luggage and left the capital early the next morning. Under the protection of 1,000 guards, he left the capital from Baiming to the Xian mansion. On the plains, after several days of preparation, under the orders of Yes Hen, the Wara began to attack the city of Sanbuchuan. They used the Baiming red coat cannons to bombard the city walls and used their own spears to attack the enemy's shields, causing Shi Wanshan's forces to be under considerable pressure and casualties. Fortunately, there were many generals in the city. Under the leadership of Commander Shi, nearly 200,000 Baiming generals took turns to defend the city, and the two sides quickly entered a stalemate. The Wara were mostly cavalry, and they were not very good at siege work. Although they had the advantage of the red coat cannons, the number of shells was limited, and it did not take long before they ran out of ammunition. Seeing the strong will of the Baiming army to resist, Yes Hen knew that the cannons could not achieve their goal of capturing the city, so he sent people to the Ili dynasty to ask for reinforcements. If there were any benefits, the two sides would share the benefits equally. Ili town was located to the north of Hatao, east of the Ili dynasty, and was an important transportation hub. At this moment, a virtuous official, Syed Ali Apel, who was also the prime minister of the Ili dynasty, was receiving General Kun Sa, who had just returned from the front lines in defeat. After Kun Sa met with Prime Minister Apel, he recounted how he had failed to negotiate with the five-star army, and how he had been ambushed by the enemy. Then, with an aggrieved expression, he begged the prime minister to avenge him, as well as the loss of 27,000 soldiers. Apu was a famous minister in history. He had great foresight and was very opinionated. He did not take Kun Sa's words at face value. Instead, he comforted Kun Sa and advised him to get some rest. Then, he called for Kun Sa's lieutenant, Wuli Ji, and one of the 50 soldiers who had followed Kun Sa and Keegan. Through talking with them, he learned the truth of the matter. Seated alone in his residence, Arab had an extremely complicated expression on his face. He had already investigated the matter. First, he and Keegan spoke rudely, which led to their nose being cut off. Then, they thought they knew the truth about the five-star army and wanted to launch a night attack. In the end, they were ambushed and defeated. Speaking of which, all of this seemed unreasonable, but in fact, the ones who were at a disadvantage were the cavalry of Ili. As their prime minister, he also had to do something. Otherwise, the morale of the army would be greatly affected. If that was the case, it would be difficult to lead the army. In front of him was all the information about the five-star army sent by the Scouts and Intelligence Department. Arab received an answer. The five-star army was powerful and had great financial resources. They were an extremely difficult opponent to deal with. Especially the speed of their development,
It gave people a feeling of stupefaction.
He even had a premonition that if he allowed the 5-star army to continue developing like this, he was afraid that there would be a day where a huge battle would break out between him and the 5-star army.
If that was the case, it would be impossible for him not to fight even if he wanted to. Since there was going to be a battle sooner or later, why not take advantage of the fact that the other party wasn't ready for a bloody battle? Even if they couldn't destroy the 5-star core, they could use this battle to deplete the other party's strength and give themselves more time to develop.
Arup was a very far-sighted person.
It was like when others could only see one step ahead, he could already see 2 steps ahead.
For the future, in order to maintain the general situation of the grassland, he finally made preparations to attack the 5-star army.
Arup, who had not slept the whole night, welcomed General Kun Sa, who had rested for the night. The Prime Minister then said in a very confident tone, "The 5-star army has used despicable means to hurt our army. If we can tolerate this, what else can we do? For the sake of Ili's dignity, this time we must teach them a lesson." "The Prime Minister is wise," Kun Sa said excitedly after he received the support. "Aha!" Arup nodded and changed the topic. "It's just that the 5-star army is not so easy to deal with. Since we are going to fight, we must find a way to win.
An alliance with the world of Wara is inevitable.
How about this? Our army will go to the Xianxia area first and discuss with Chief Yes-hen before we fight." This general obeys. When Kun Sa saw that this was going to be a big fight, he was so excited that his face turned red. It was time for him to make a contribution and take revenge. This time, the Kingdom of Ili sent a total of 180,000 troops at Yes-hen's request.
Apart from the 10,000 cavalry, 20,000 infantry, and 30,000 cavalry that were killed by the 5-star army, the rest of the 100,000 cavalry and 50,000 infantry were all brought to the battlefield.
This time, in order to achieve the goal of severely damaging the 5-star army in one attack, Prime Minister Arup gave the order and the 150,000 troops set out from Ili city to the Xianxia area, which was a few hundred miles away. In the Hatao area, only General Bo Muir from the world of Wara and his 80,000 cavalry and 20,000 infantry were left. Even so, the Datong soldiers were still scared into hiding in the Ningxia garrison and did not dare to take a step out. After all these years of development, Yes-hen's strength had also grown. He now had a total of 270,000 troops, of which 20,000 were infantry and the rest were cavalry. Other than the 100,000 troops that were left behind to guard the Hatao area, he still had 170,000 cavalry soldiers. Most of them were brave warriors who could fight in battle, so they were not to be underestimated. It was a pity that cavalry soldiers were good at destroying their opponents while moving. Siege warfare like this was not their forte. Just like now, even after using up all 100 of the Baiming's redcoat cannons, they were still unable to take down Sonbu Lechuan. At this moment, they could only sigh as they looked at the heavily damaged city not far away. Reporting, Lord Chief, the Prime Minister of the Ili Kingdom, Ali Pu, personally led a total of 150,000 soldiers from Ili Kingdom towards us from Ili Kingdom. The scout half knelt and reported the battle situation. "Arup is here, haha, good. With them, it won't be difficult to capture Sanbuchuan city." Ha! Hearing this, Yi Xian was naturally overjoyed. Truly, a pillow came when one was sleepy. At the same time, in the Yang residence in Genesis City, Yang Chendong received a report from the scouts on the front lines. The report stated that Ali Pu was leading 150,000 soldiers to the Shajing region, but his intentions were unclear. Standing in front of the sand table, Yang Chendong stood there for a long time, but he did not understand the main point. He was thinking about a question. Who was the target of the Ili army this time? If they were coming for the Baiming army, then why didn't they come with Yes-hen? Why did they only come after the vanguard suffered a loss? Was it possible that they were here to take revenge? Did they really have the guts to do so? As the saying goes, the ignorant are innocent. The power of the 5-star army was known by the nearby grassland tribes. Therefore, the 5-star army had long become an existence that no one dared to provoke. But because the distance was too far, the Ili army did not know the real situation of the 5-star army. Without understanding the situation, they might really do something stupid. Before he could figure this out completely, his personal telegrapher, Wang Shan, sent another telegram from the Security Bureau of the Northern Ming Dynasty. It explained in detail what happened in the Imperial Court of the Northern Ming Dynasty and how Su Yozhen, the Minister of the Ministry of Justice,
asked to come to Shur City to persuade him to provide provisions to Sanbachuan City. Interesting. Looking at this telegram, Yang Qindong's eyes flashed with a meaningful smile. He had a feeling that Su Yozhen must have come to give him some good news. Otherwise, he wouldn't make such a big decision without asking for his permission. It was just that Baiming already owed him 11 million taels of silver. What benefits could they give him? Yang Qindong was not a god. Su Yozhen did not leak the news that he was going to be crowned king in advance. Of course he would not be able to guess. Su Yozhen, who brought the Imperial edict, rode a fast horse day and night after leaving Baiming's capital. Now that the military situation was urgent, there was no time to waste. The most important thing was that if the 5-star army couldn't provide provisions to Sanbu Lachuan in time, once the city was breached, all of his plans would fail. The so-called king conferment would also come to nothing. In that case, his so-called great achievements would also disappear without a trace. Not wanting to see such an outcome, Su Yozhen was forced to change horses and not people along the way. The journey that should have taken a month took only 13 days to get out of Talu City and to the foot of the city. Su Yozhen was Baiming's Minister of Justice, a major second-rank civil official. He was an extremely important person even without any auxiliary officials. In order to show his respect, Yang Qindong took the initiative to come out of the city to welcome him. Several thousand cavalry stood on both sides, displaying such a grand display. While Su Yozhen, who had just arrived, was extremely moved, he was also inwardly shocked. As the Minister of Justice, he had tens of thousands of bailiffs under his command. Among them, there was no lack of capable people with extraordinary means. There were even some people who had made quite a name for themselves. Their murderous aura could often make criminals tremble all over just by standing there, and they would open their mouths to plead guilty before being tortured. Just from this aspect alone, Su Yozhen could be considered someone who had seen a bit of the world. At the very least, a normal formation would not scare him. In his eyes, the killing intent of a murderer was nothing much. He was already used to it. Only now, when he saw these cavalry soldiers, did he understand what it meant to be a small fry in front of a great one. There would always be someone stronger. Chapter 970. These cavalrymen were just sitting on their horses, but their murderous aura was overflowing. They were imposing without being angry, giving Su Yozhen a very oppressive feeling. In addition, they had been on the road non-stop for days without rest. At this moment, his face was frighteningly pale. "You can all leave." Yang Qindong noticed the change in Su Yozhen and knew that the deterrence effect had worked. He immediately waved his hand at the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, Jianghu. That's right, the cavalrymen who stood on both sides and temporarily acted as the welcoming team were Jianghu's 1st Cavalry Division. This was their first appearance after returning to the beginning city. Before this, Jianghu had been selecting and evaluating the new members of the cavalry division. From the original 3 divisions to the current 5 divisions, almost half of the military strength was expanded. This was naturally a good thing for Jianghu. However, how to increase the number of people without losing the combat power was the problem he should consider. In order to achieve the individual quality of every soldier and to be able to exert enough strength and play a role on the battlefield, Jianghu personally participated in the evaluation. In this way, he selected people one by one. It was not easy to gather more than 4,000 people and complete the task of expanding the division. It was just a source of 4,000 soldiers, but it took a few months. Just from this point alone, the combat power of the 1st Cavalry Division would only become stronger. Even Yang Qindong was looking forward to their performance on the battlefield. The 1st Cavalry Division's first appearance scared the senior officials sent by the Imperial Court of Baiming. Although the commander, Jianghu, looked serious, he was in a good mood. Obviously, he was very satisfied with this result. Until Yang Qindong waved his hand, he led the team to continue their inhuman training. Perhaps Su Yozhen was tired, or perhaps she was afraid, but she was sent to rest in the carriage. Yang Qindong wanted to know the other party's intentions for coming here, mainly to see what kind of conditions the substitute sect master Zhu Qiyu could offer, and whether or not he would be moved. However, looking at Su Yozhen's current state, it was clear that they couldn't discuss anything. He had no choice but to arrange for him to stay in the guest house at the beginning of the city and wait for him to rest. Su Yozhen had a good sleep. He slept from the afternoon all the way until the next morning.
When he opened his eyes and woke up, he felt much less tired.
At this moment, it could be said that his ears and eyes were sharp, and he was full of energy.
After waking up early in the morning and changing into clean clothes, Su Yozhen was attracted by the hawkers outside the guest house. He decided not to ask someone to prepare breakfast. Instead, he decided to go out for a walk and try the local snacks. Under the protection of a squad of soldiers in the open and in the dark, Su Yozhen came to the street. He saw a very bustling scene, a street market that was not inferior to the morning market of the capital. When he saw the people in costumes of various races walking in a friendly and harmonious manner on the wide street, and the peddlers selling food, clothes, necessities, and toys were next to each other, and there were people standing in front of each stall, he could not help but ask the guide arranged for him by the guest house curiously. Everyone is from different races. How can they get along harmoniously? How can the language problem be solved? What if there is a dispute? The guide was a man in his 30s. He was originally a squad leader of the new army, but his leg was injured in a battle. He could not gallop freely on a horse, so he retired and worked in the guest house. As someone who had seen much of the world, he had received countless guests and encountered all kinds of questions. He was not surprised by Su Yozhen's curiosity at all. Instead, he explained with a face full of enthusiasm. Sir, please rest assured. The language problem has long been regulated. When you enter the first city, you must speak Chinese in public. For this reason, there is a special Chinese class for everyone to learn, and it is free. In the first city, only after learning Chinese can one be allowed to do business. When everyone speaks Chinese, there is naturally no problem of language barriers. Once there is a dispute, there will be special management personnel to judge who is right and wrong. However, at the same time, any fighting is prohibited in the city. Otherwise, no matter who is right or wrong, they will be severely punished. Facing the guide with a smile, Su Yozhen first nodded and then shook his head. There were also laws in the capital. If one did something bad or wrong, one would be locked up in the Ministry of Justice. However, such things could not be eliminated. Why was there also a law to regulate it? It seemed that the public security in the first city was very orderly. Until now, he had not seen a case of an argument, let alone a fight. Huai Yu was puzzled and could not help but ask again. The law here must be very strict, right? It was no wonder that Su Yozhen would have such a thought. If the law was not strict, there would definitely be people who could not help but suppress their temper and violate the law. Only harsh laws could make people have no choice but to restrain their temperament under high pressure. Sir, you're right. The law in the first city is quite strict. Once someone makes a mistake, the lightest punishment is a warning, and the heaviest punishment is a beheading. The guide nodded and answered with a straight face. Beheaded? That will make everyone afraid from the bottom of their hearts. Su Yozhen said this as the Minister of Justice. As soon as he finished speaking, the guide beside him shook his head. Sir, you're wrong. Although there is the crime of being beheaded, in fact, there are very few people who are beheaded. After all, if they are not vicious and evil people, they won't be sentenced to such a heavy sentence. In fact, what everyone is most afraid of is being kicked out of the first city and being ordered to never enter all the cities under the jurisdiction of the 5-star army. This is the most unacceptable thing for ordinary people. Being expelled? Although this is also a heavy sentence, it doesn't seem to be a very serious matter. Su Yozhen had a look of disagreement on her face. It's just being kicked out of the city. Isn't there a saying in the underworld that if there's no place for you, there will be a place for you? No. Sir, you don't know, but all the cities under the control of the 5-star army are guaranteed safety. Once you enter such a city, it's equivalent to having a guarantee of safety. This guarantee is something that the grassland people didn't have in the past. They're used to wandering around, especially in recent years. They're even prepared to have a machete on their necks in the middle of the night when they sleep at night. This makes them feel too insecure, and this sense of security happens to be given to everyone by the 5-star army. Therefore, the right to live in the city is precious to many people. At this point, the guide introduced with a smile. Sir, if you don't believe me, you can go and see if the people in the city have a relaxed smile on their faces. This is the charm of the 5-star army city because everyone knows that as long as they abide by the law here, no one will threaten their safety. They can also live a happy life with their hands. Isn't this what the ordinary people need? The words "what the ordinary people need" caused Su Yozhen's face to turn red. Indeed,
What the ordinary people wanted was to have food to eat, clothes to wear, and a house to sleep in. As long as these conditions were met, they would usually become very obedient under normal circumstances. However, this simple request wasn't something that all governments could fulfill. They continued to walk on the street, looking and carefully observing. Just as the guide said, most of the ordinary people had a very natural and relaxed smile on their faces. This kind of smile was rare even in the capital of Baiming. It had been less than 3 years since the establishment of the first city, but now it was so prosperous. Just on this point, Su Yozhen had to admire Yang Qindong's ability. This made him even more determined to follow in Yang Qindong's footsteps and not waver easily. After having breakfast on the street, he found time to chat with some ordinary people. After having a clearer understanding of the situation in the first city, Beta Persei appeared beside him. "Minister Su, you're in a good mood." "Ah! It's Brother Beta Persei. Did the Duke of Loyalty summon me?" At this moment, Su Yozhen's attitude became more respectful. "That's right. I went to the guest house and found that Sir Su was not there. It turns out that you're here to check on the situation of the people. How is it? When are you going to see the young master?" Beta Persei said unhurriedly. Originally, Yang Qindong's order to him was very relaxed, and everything was based on Su Yozhen's own decision. I'll go now. Su Yozhen held a copy of the first city's Yang report in his hand and raised his arm. From this newspaper, he had a clearer understanding of the situation in the first city. He had a clear understanding that this was indeed a developing and thriving city. Although its foundation was still lacking, it was full of vitality. Anyone with a little knowledge could see its potential. In particular, Yang Baozhong had specially opened a current affairs column, which clearly talked about the war that was going on in Sanbuchuan City hundreds of miles away. Everything was written on the surface, but there was not the slightest bit of panic in the first city. This alone was something that the capital of Baiming could not compare to. Compared to the people there who were afraid of war and the imperial court had to block all unfavorable news of the war, the calmness of the people here surprised Su Yozhen. They were not afraid of war. What kind of courage was this? How did Yang Qindong do this? All of this made Su Yozhen curious. Now, he wanted to see Yang Qindong and get an answer. "Okay, Sir Su, please come with me." Yang Er smiled as he led the way. Su Yozhen was in the middle of the group. It was unknown when, but many soldiers in civilian clothes had appeared behind her. They were protecting her very tightly. After all, Su Yozhen came to represent the face of Baiming. There must be no accidents. Chapter 971. In the Yang residence, various fruits had already been placed on the stone table in the courtyard, and the freshly brewed tea leaves were still steaming. When Su Yozhen arrived, she saw Yang Qindong looking at Yang Bao leisurely. This was almost a daily homework for Yang Qindong. He would learn about what happened yesterday through the newspaper. If he thought something was important, he would pay extra attention to it. When necessary, he would order people to deal with it. This not only made him closer to the people, but also gave them a sense of loyalty and courage, which increased the importance of Yang Bao in the first city. "Young Master Lord Su is here." Beta Persei's voice could be heard from a distance. When Yang Qindong turned his head, he saw Su Yozhen standing there respectfully a few steps away. His head was slightly lowered, and he looked like a subordinate meeting a superior. Yang Qindong was not surprised that Su Yozhen would have such an attitude. With the reminder that he had personally gone to Baiming's capital last time, and seeing the prosperity of the first city this time, as long as there was nothing wrong with his brain, he would know what kind of attitude he should have after seeing him. "Come, Minister Su, come and take a seat." Yang Qindong waved his hand while he was still far away. Su Yozhen quickly agreed and hurried over. As he walked forward, Yang Qindong's voice could be heard again. "Beta Persei, pass down the order. If there is nothing particularly important this morning, the young master will not see any guests." "Understood." Beta Persei agreed and left. Soon, there was the sound of the courtyard door closing behind him, indicating that Yang Qindong was going to have a long talk with him. Su Yozhen hurried over and sat down opposite Yang Qindong. When he looked up, his eyes were filled with curiosity, doubt, and even admiration. Yang Qindong saw Su Yozhen's performance from the corner of his eyes and smiled in his heart. If a capable person wanted to control him, he would have to show more ability.
Clearly, he had done it now. Minister Su, you've traveled thousands of miles to come here. You must have something to teach me, right? But I wonder if it's good news?
It's good news, great news, sixth young master. After being stared at by Yang Chendong, Su Yozhen's original intention of playing with him disappeared. She stretched out her hand and took out her trump card, the Imperial edict that conferred the title of king. His original intention to bargain was no longer there. The only thing left was how to make Yang Chendong happy and please him. Sixth young master, this is the Imperial edict of bestowment that I have spent a great deal of effort to get from the Daizong Emperor.
Please take a look and see if you are satisfied.
Coronation Imperial Decree. Yang Chendong, who had originally ignored everything that had happened, had a change in expression at this moment. Yang Chendong had tried many times to be bestowed the title of king, but the great Ming dynasty's ancestral system was there. It was obviously difficult and not easy to succeed. But as the Yang faction's influence continued to expand, this thought also faded away. Could it be that if he didn't become king, he would have no power? Could it be that if the great Ming dynasty didn't recognize him, his Xianxia wouldn't exist? He just didn't expect that a good thing like being bestowed the title of king would fall on his head when he had already given up on it. With a trace of excitement, Yang Chendong opened the Imperial edict under the golden cover. Holding the Imperial edict in his hand, he looked at the words one by one. After a while, Yang Chendong's voice sounded with a sigh. Bugnam of Gojosian, hee. Although there are other motives, the Daizong Emperor has indeed put in some capital this time. Presumably, the things he needs me to do won't be too small. What kind of person was Yang Chendong? How shrewd and ruthless was his vision? Just the title of Bugnam of Gojosian made him see a lot of problems. There was no need to mention the word martial. His various actions had already proved that this word was really appropriate to use on him. The word south had some meaning. It meant that the small countries of the southern barbarian that Yang Chendong occupied were all in the south. He himself should also be in the south. As for the matters in the north, he didn't need to worry about them. Although it was just a title, the Daizong Emperor of Beiming still expressed his intention. That was, he hoped that Yang Chendong wouldn't stay in the north and would go to the south to cause trouble for the southern Ming. The sixth young master, this title was reported to the Daizong Emperor after much consideration. I think this is the only way for this title to be granted. If there is anything inappropriate, I hope that the sixth young master will forgive me. Su Yozhen lowered his head and said these words with a slightly guilty conscience. He couldn't tell if Yang Chendong really liked this title, but he didn't dare to hide the things that should be said. He also had to express the attitude that should be expressed. Feeling Su Yozhen's cautiousness, he sighed in admiration. This person was indeed worthy of being a powerful official in history. His ability to observe people's expressions and see through people's hearts was truly extraordinary. However, since he was already granted the title of king, his wish had been fulfilled. As for the title of king, he didn't really care. Could it be that if he was granted the title of Bugnam of Gojosian, he would only be able to move about in the south? Turning his head, he folded the Imperial edict and put it aside. Yang Chendong's face revealed a sincere smile. What is Minister Su saying? Being granted the title of king is enough. What is inappropriate about it? Don't think too much. Come, let me toast you with tea in place of wine. I don't dare. Su Yozhen said as he stood up. Yang Chendong had already laughed heartily and drank the tea. Then, he gestured for Su Yozhen to sit down. Minister Su, there are no outsiders here. It's just the two of us. There's no need to be so formal. I won't call you minister anymore. How about I change it to Brother Su? That's good. Su Yozhen nodded continuously. From the moment he entered this small courtyard, the initiative was completely in Yang Chendong's hands. What he needed to do was to conform to this person. Yes, Brother Su. In order to achieve this Imperial edict, you must have put in a lot of effort. Tell me more about it. Yang Chendong asked with a smile on his face. He had thought of many ways to achieve this but failed. Now that Su Yozhen had done it, he wanted to reward him. Yes, sixth young master. The situation is like this.
Su Yozhen knew that this was not the time to be polite.
He told him about his proposal in the Imperial court, as well as the discussion he had with the Emperor and eunuch Jin Ing in the back of the palace.
Yang Chendong sat there and listened attentively. From time to time, he would nod and cooperate with Su Yozhen's speech. When Su Yozhen stopped talking, he laughed loudly and said, "You only gave Jin Ing 100,000 taels of silver in exchange for the title of king?" "Yes, that's the only condition." Su Yozhen nodded, but he was shocked. He knew that Yang Chendong was rich. The goods sold by the Beyond Heavens Trading Company in the capital were all profitable.
100,000 taels of silver was not a problem for him.
However, transporting food to Sanbuchuan was not an easy task. No matter how he looked at it, this person did not seem to care. Without Su Yozhen's shock at the Imperial court, Yang Chendong spoke again. "All right, if it's only a small matter, this king can agree to it right now."
At this moment, he considered himself to be the Bugnom of Gojoseon.
After saying this, he said generously, "Brother Su has worked hard this time. Naturally, you should be rewarded."
"How about this? I will give you 200,000 taels of silver as a reward."
This way, she could earn 200,000 taels of silver. Su Yozhen's heart was naturally overjoyed, but her face still had to put on a look of refusal. "Aya, sixth young master, you can't do this. You said that we are on the same boat, and I will be your subordinate in the future. How can you give me money like this?" I have to give. If you have done well, you should be rewarded. This is my rule." "All right, Brother Su, I will not refuse. If I continue to refuse, I will only think that 200,000 taels of silver is too little." "All right, then thank you, sixth young master." Su Yozhen immediately stopped talking. He knew what it meant to be insatiable. He also knew that such people were the most disliked. He knew when to stop. "Yes." Seeing that Su Yozhen was so tactful, Yang Chendong smiled in satisfaction. Then his tone changed. "With just this small benefit, I'm afraid it is not enough to make this a reality. I think Dai Zong still needs to give a gift. How about this? Give him 5 million taels of silver." Give Dai Zong 5 million taels of silver? When he heard this, Su Yozhen's eyes widened. He didn't know what was wrong with Yang Chendong to say such a thing. Could it be that he had too much money? Even if others didn't ask for money, he still wanted to give them money? Su Yozhen had wrongly accused Yang Chendong. Xianxia had opened up a business path. Many of the products were not available outside. He had indeed relied on this to make a lot of money. However, ever since Xianxia was established, it was not an exaggeration to say that he spent money like water. Especially after occupying a piece of land, he needed a lot of money to build it. Many of the small countries that he occupied had not been able to fully display their usefulness. There was no way to get back the money, and they still needed Xiaxia's constant financial support. One place was like this, 2 places were like this. When the land was like this, Xianxia did not have a lot of money in his hands. Although it could not be described as having too much money to make ends meet, he still needed to think carefully before casually giving out 5 million taels of silver. Even though he knew this, Yang Chendong still did it. The reason was because of what Su Yozhen said. Dai Zong had written an imperial edict, but if he wanted to announce the matter of him being crowned king, he needed to wait for Yang Chendong to resolve the crisis in Sanbulachuan city. However, would the truth really be like this? Would Dai Zong go back on his word? Right now, he didn't want to see the 200,000 Baiming soldiers fall, so he had no choice but to crown himself as king. Once the crisis was resolved, if he didn't want to, he would have 100 or even 1,000 reasons to not fulfill his promise. At that time, what would Yang Chendong do? Would he start a war with Baiming? Let's not talk about whether or not Xianxia had such strength now. Just the fact that once the war started, it would be a kind of damage to the Han people. This was far from what Yang Chendong wanted to see. Thus, in order to prevent him from breaking his promise, he had to give Baiming 5 million taels of silver. Chapter 972. Of course, Yang Chendong also had his own thoughts on how to give out the money since they were both giving it to him. He wouldn't just give out the money. His true intention was to take advantage of the situation to Baiming the imperial court.
"Brother Su, has Baiming always been short of money?" Yang Chendong had just said that he would give her 5 million taels of silver. Su Yozhen was also taken aback by his sudden change in tone. However, she quickly nodded her head and replied, "That's right. Ever since the Northern Ming Empire started recruiting soldiers, there has never been an abundance of silver. Because of this, the agricultural tax has been pushed forward to 3 years later, causing the commoners to complain. This method of drinking the blood of the commoners is wrong. It might succeed for a while, but it will only bring more trouble. This is not what a wise person would do," Yang Chendong said in disagreement. The previous emperors all knew that water could carry a boat, but it could also sink it. However, there were only a few who could do this. Yes, all the officials in the Imperial court know this, but there is no other way. Su Yozhen also shook her head. In her heart, she thought that not everyone was as capable as the sixth young master, who had the ability to turn stone into gold. He didn't know what Su Yozhen was thinking, and he didn't have the time to think about it. Yang Chendong changed the topic again. "I remember that Bai Ming wanted to copy this prince's bank. That is a very profitable business. So why didn't they do it?" Sigh. When this matter was mentioned, Su Yozhen seemed to have changed into a different person. Her face was filled with anger as she said with righteous indignation, "Yes, when we saw that the Yang family's bank was so prosperous and could gather the commoners' money for use, Bai Ming the Imperial court also wanted to copy it. This matter was even placed on the desk of the 6 ministers. But before the bank was built, the officials had already rushed in like a swarm of bees. This yamen was short of money, and that department was short of money. Just the price they quoted was an astronomical figure. If that was the case, they would take away as much money as the bank deposited. In the end, the matter came to an end. Oh right, at that time, Bai Ming also wanted to take over the Yang family's bank. They didn't succeed either. Ha ha ha, hearing that Bai Ming wanted to take over Yang Chendong's bank, Yang Chendong couldn't help but laugh. He had known this for a long time. Back then, he had used the name of a mercenary army to win the defense of the capital, causing some people to be wary of attacking the rat for fear of breaking the vases. Afterward, he had marched south to make his name and prestige known. Reality had proven that wealth without strength would only make one an existence that others could bully. But now, as Xianxia continued to expand, not even Bai Ming dared to carelessly attack him. They could only watch as the Yang clan bank continued to expand, but there was nothing they could do about it. Seeing that Yang Chendong seemed to be in a good mood, Su Yozhen cautiously asked, "Sixth young master, you didn't give this 5 million taels of silver to Bai Ming to build the bank, right?" "Amazing. Amazing. Brother Su knows me best." Yang Chendong not only did not deny it, he even openly admitted it. You can't do that. It's like throwing a meat bun at a dog. There's no return." Su Yozhen hurriedly waved his hands, wanting to dissuade Yang Chendong. Knowing that Su Yozhen was thinking for him, Yang Chendong put on a grateful expression and said, "I naturally understand Brother Su's thoughts. You are indeed doing this for the sake of this prince. But this prince said that this 5 million taels of silver was originally intended to be given to Bai Ming. It's within my expectations that it won't come back. On the contrary, using this 5 million taels of silver to mess up Bai Ming's economy is appropriate." Mess up the economy? Su Yozhen looked puzzled. Yes, it's messing up the economy. Yang Chendong nodded and admitted. Since Su Yozhen came and saw the power of the first city, Yang Chendong believed that there would be no more disloyalty in the future. Therefore, Yang Chendong treated him as one of his own and did not intend to hide anything. Yes, these 5 million taels of silver are the gunpowder that will destroy the foundation of the Northern Ming dynasty. Unless they can really make good use of it, otherwise, some people will be blown to pieces. Seeing that Su Yozhen was still puzzled, Yang Chendong calmed down and continued to explain, "Brother Su, let's put it this way. Do you think that the current problem of Bai Ming can be solved with 5 million taels of silver?" "No." Su Yozhen gave an answer without thinking. This was not because he was too decisive, but the fact was originally like this. Just like Yang Chendong had a dream, the acting emperor of Bai Ming also had his own dream, which was to unify the great Ming dynasty and restore the glory of his ancestors. If he wanted to do this, it was not something that could be solved with 5 million taels of silver. Even if 2, 5, or even 10 5 million taels of silver were given to him, he would still have a way to spend it all. Yang Chendong knew this, but he still only took out 5 million taels of silver. This was originally a trap or bait. Brother Su, to tell you the truth, Baiming's imperial court is full of corrupt officials and eunuchs monopolizing power. There is no way out in future. Such a country will perish sooner or later. It's just a matter of time. It's just a matter of how many years the Han people will have to suffer. This was the first time Yang Qindong talked about such a big matter with Su Yozhen. At this moment, he also had a serious face and quickly digested everything Yang Qindong said in his heart. Now that the world is in chaos, there are few peaceful places. The so-called rise, the people suffer. Fall, the people also suffer. The reason for this is that the system is not right. It is because the officials protect each other and the officials do not care about the people's opinions. My Xianxia's development is precisely because I saw these shortcomings. That is why I thought of a way to change everything and even wanted to build a new world. We will do our best to change what can be changed. As for what cannot be changed, we will directly destroy it and build a new foundation. Baiming is still all right and can be changed. At the very least, they have the kindest and purest people in the world. So what needs to be changed is only the imperial court. As he spoke, he paid attention to the changes in Su Yozhen's face. He found that although this person was shocked, he was not angry. Yang Qindong knew that this person should have seen through his ambition. He smiled and said, however, in order to achieve the goal of change, we need to Baiming's imperial court to make more mistakes, to the point that the people no longer support them. That is the time for me to make a move. In order to achieve this goal, this king has decided to support Baiming's establishment of a bank and invest 5 million taels of silver as the foundation. It is still the same as before. If they use it well, this will be a wealth for development. If they don't use it well, this hole will only grow bigger and bigger. In the end, even if they throw their own bodies into it, they will not be able to fill it. This is the gunpowder that will destroy Baiming's foundation? Su Yozhen finally understood and said with a face of shock. Whether it is gunpowder or not, it will depend on what the current emperor does. I have already given out the 5 million taels of silver. Whether it is a blessing or a curse, it is all up to him. Of course, on the surface, the 5 million taels of silver is not a gift, but a loan. Moreover, this money must be placed in the most conspicuous place in Baiming's bank so that everyone can see it. Why is that? Su Yozhen asked with a face of confusion. It is very simple. With the 5 million taels of silver, everyone will feel at ease and will deposit their money into Baiming's bank. This is called the butterfly effect. Yang Qindong chuckled. Then, he thought of the hole he had dug for the Southern Ming Empire. That was to sell grain to them at a normal price. Over time, the Southern Ming Empire's grain fields would be abandoned because they no longer had any value. At that time, if the Xianxia suddenly stopped exporting grain to the Southern Ming Empire, what would the result be? It would probably be a heavy blow to the Southern Ming Empire. Northern silver and Southern grain. This was the main dish that Yang Qindong had prepared for the Southern Baiming. One could only imagine how terrifying the consequences would be if they were to be activated one day. Yang Qindong naturally would not tell Su Yozhen what to do about the Southern Ming Empire. However, he did not hold back and told her everything about Baiming. Su Yozhen's neck was covered in cold sweat as she listened. In the end, she kept nodding her head. At noon, Su Yozhen stayed at the Yang residence for lunch. The sixth Madam, Luan Xiaoyu, also came out to accompany her, expressing how much Yang Qindong valued her. In the afternoon, the people accompanying Su Xianxia were replaced by the guards. They accompanied Su Xianxia to stroll around the first city to let him relax. According to Yang Qindong, he would immediately prepare for the transportation of grain, but it would take 2 to 3 days. After all, it was the food for 200,000 people. In the afternoon, the logistics division commander, Yang Si, rushed over and listened to the young master's arrangements. The new army commander, Tiger's Mane, and Beta Persei were responsible for accompanying him. Yang Qindong continuously reported a lot of numbers, all of which were prepared to be sent to Sanbachuan City. As the largest city in the grassland, the first city naturally prepared a lot of necessities like grain. It was just a month and a half's worth of grain for 200,000 people, so it was not a big problem. After Yang Qindong finished giving out the orders one by one, Yang Si naturally nodded his head continuously, indicating that he would do it as soon as he went back. He would try to prepare everything in the shortest time possible and send it to Sanbuchuan City on the carriage. When Commander Tiger's Mane saw that they were going to transport grain to Beiming, he immediately expressed a different opinion. Young master, you said that we will have a battle with Beiming and Southern Ming Empire sooner or later. Why are we sending them grain now? Isn't this helping our opponents and helping them become stronger? Well, a battle is inevitable, but how big the scale of this battle is can be carefully considered. Let's put it this way. If we do it well, the scale of this battle may be very small, so small that it can be ignored. On the contrary, if the preparation is not done well, the scale of this battle will be very big. Even if we win, Southern Ming Beiming will not be able to recover. If that's the case, after we move there, we will need to spend more energy to help them develop. In contrast, we are just transporting some grain now. It's nothing compared to what we will have to pay in the future. The three people in front of him were very close to him, so he naturally told them everything without hiding anything. Chapter 973. Beta Persei and Xianxia just nodded without saying a word. In their eyes, any decision made by the young master was the right one. All they had to do was to obey. Tiger's Mane didn't nod immediately. Instead, after thinking for a while, he suddenly looked up and said with a surprised expression, "Young master, are you planning to peacefully recover the north and south of the great Ming dynasty?" It's impossible to achieve complete peace. We still have to fight a war, and the best way is to talk while fighting. Of course, it's too early to say this. The great Ming dynasty's foundation is still there, and it's far from being solved in a short period of time. A starving camel is still bigger than a horse, and we still have too much work to do. Yang Chendong looked up at the sky and said with a sigh, "Hee, young master, you don't have to be so melancholic. As long as you want to do something, there's nothing you can't do. Besides, our 5-star army has given the Han people so good and generous. One day, they will all be loyal to us. At that time, maybe the great Ming dynasty will really be defeated without a fight." Beta Persei saw that the young master's mood seemed a little heavy, so he quickly interjected. This finally attracted Yang Chendong's smile. "Not bad, Beta Persei is getting better at talking. Hee, it's all thanks to young master's good teaching, good teaching." Beta Persei scratched his head and showed a silly expression. "Okay, don't flatter me here. Go and prepare." Yang Chendong smiled and waved his hand. Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei, and Xianxia all turned around and left. When Tiger's man left, he was both excited and worried. When he returned to the barracks, he went straight to the deputy commander's office. As soon as he entered the room, he told him about the young master's plan to send provisions to Beiming's army in Sanbuchuan. Is the 6th young master going to make a move? When Shibei heard this, his eyes revealed a slightly shocked expression. Wait a minute. It's just a delivery of provisions. They didn't say that they were going to start a war. Tiger's Mane's expression turned serious when he heard this. Shibei shook his head and said, "We're already planning to send food to Sanbuchuan. Why would the War of Wara agree? When the time comes, one of them will send food while the other won't. Do you think we should fight?" But young master didn't say anything. Tiger's Mane shook his head and said uncertainly. The 6th young master didn't say anything. He probably has his own ideas, but it's not mature yet, so there's no need to tell us. But as the leaders of the new army, we have to be prepared in advance. How about this? We'll immediately call the staff officers over for a meeting and see what preparations we have to make once the war starts. Shibei also shook his head. Facts had proven that Yang Chendong's thoughts were not something they could guess, but it was always right to do some work in advance. Yang Chendong really didn't make a final decision to fight. If it was just sending provisions and not fighting with the War of Wara, of course it would be the best choice, and he was willing to put in some effort for this choice. After all, the War of Wara had hundreds of thousands of cavalry in front of them. It wasn't easy to fight them, not to mention that the Ili army was moving towards Sanbuchuan. They were also an existence that couldn't be ignored. In line with the principle of not fighting, Yang Chendong personally wrote a letter to the head of the reconnaissance team, Ding Shan, and sent it to the tile camp. In the Wallace camp under Sanbuchuan, Ding Shan, who was wearing a military green uniform and a colonel rank, rode alone outside the Wallace camp. He reported his name and said that he wanted to see the leader of the Walla, Yes-hen. The 5-star army sent a representative, which was originally within Yeshen's expectations. His influence was not far from the first city, but Yang Chendong still didn't respond at all. Instead, he began to worry. Now that the other party finally sent someone, he immediately ordered his subordinate, General Teng Shu, to go out of the camp and personally bring the person back to the camp. In the main tent, the spirited Ding Shan saw Yi Xian, who sat on a tiger pelt and exuded the air of a ruler, exuding a dignified air. Ding Shan, the leader of the 5-star army's reconnaissance team, greets leader Yes-hen. Ding Shan's gaze first scanned the main tent and found that there were more than a dozen grassland boars dressed in strange clothes. All of them were tall and had fierce gazes, but he didn't show the slightest fear. Instead, he bowed to Yes-hen with a calm expression. "Oh, you're a leader. As far as I know, with your status, you can be considered a top figure in the 5-star army." Yes-hen looked at Ding Shan as if he could see through people's hearts. The other party was very young and had a lot of bearing, which made him unhappy. In his opinion, after entering his tent, the other party's legs should be weak and his whole body should be trembling. "I'm not a big figure. I'm just a little more courageous," Ding Shan said, degrading himself. "Yes, you're quite courageous. You dare to come to my camp alone. Aren't you afraid of death?" "That's right. Don't talk about not killing envoys in a war. Not long ago, you guys dug out the nose of an envoy from the Ili Brigade. That did happen, right?" The more he looked at Ding Shan's fearless appearance, the angrier Yes-hen became. He wanted to scare the other party and let them understand that being arrogant in front of him wouldn't end well. "That's right." Ding Shan didn't avoid the topic. Instead, he nodded seriously and admitted, "That did happen. That envoy's name was Hikagan." Because he spoke rudely, his nose was dug out. "But I didn't speak rudely to leader Yes-hen, right? It's not up to you to decide if he's being rude or not. Right now, it's up to me to decide. Men, drag him away and dig his nose out." He waved his hand, as if saying, "I'm being unreasonable, I'm being rude and unreasonable, so what can you do about it?" After the order was given, General Teng Shu stood up and walked towards Ding Shan with large strides. "Don't move," Ding Shan yelled as he stretched out his right hand and made a strangling gesture towards his neck. "If any one of you dares to come near, I'll die in front of you. Don't move." Yes-hen was shocked by this sudden scene. Then, he slowly leaned against the back of the chair as if he was adjusting his emotions. After a while he asked, "Are you really not afraid of death?" "Everyone is afraid of death. But I'd rather commit suicide than fall into your hands." Ding Shan's voice was loud and clear. He didn't have the slightest intention of lowering his head just because he was in a weaker position. The soldiers of the 5-star army can't be humiliated by anyone. The loud voice reverberated in the air above the main tent and didn't disappear for a long time. Yes-hen, who was sitting at the head of the table, had an ugly expression on his face. Just now, he only wanted to scare Ding Shan a little, and take control of the initiative. In truth, he didn't want to offend the war god for a small regiment commander that he had never heard of. No matter what other people said about Yang Chendong, whether it was the war god, the Duke of Loyalty and Courage, or even the title of Heavenly Khan, in Yeshen's eyes, Yang Chendong was still the war god who had stopped him from entering Baiming's capital. He would never forget the scene when the other party looked at him from afar and fired the cannons. This was a demon-like existence. At that time, Yes-hen was afraid and retreated. After so many years, he originally thought that the young Yang Chendong, who was shining brightly, would fade into the crowd under the great Ming dynasty's system. After all, he was too young and too powerful, which didn't conform to the Han's doctrine of the mean. However, everything had developed beyond his expectations. After not seeing him for 6 years, the other party had already grown into someone who could face him head-on. Furthermore, the power he controlled wasn't weaker than his own. In fact, it was even stronger. Fine, even if he couldn't do anything to the war god, he could at least find some sense of victory by bullying the people under him. Who would have thought that the regiment commander who came would be so stubborn and would threaten him with death? This time, he had lifted a rock and smashed it on his own foot. He was in a dilemma. His gaze landed on Ding Shan's face and he carefully scrutinized it. After confirming that the other party did not have any intention of joking with him, He waved his hand at Tang Shu with a stern face and told him to return to his original position. After doing all this, he looked at Ding Shan and said very seriously, "Speak, why did the war god ask you to come find me?"
Ding Shan's right hand didn't move away from his neck.
Instead, his left hand reached into his chest and took out a letter. With a flick of his wrist, the letter flew to the desk in front of Yes Hen.
"This is a letter from our 6th young master to you. Read it and you'll understand."
Reaching out to take the letter, he opened it and slowly read it.
Yeshen's expression became somewhat ugly.
The moment he put down the letter, he looked at Ding Shan and said angrily, "The war god wants to send food to the Baiming army that I've surrounded?"
"Yes."
Ding Shan nodded heavily and said, "The 6th young master doesn't want to become enemies with the Walla, so he notified you in advance.
As for whether to fight or to make peace, that's up to you."
Now that the letter has been delivered, if leader Yes Hen doesn't object, this regiment commander will return to report to the 6th young master.
"We can't let him leave. This is simply a provocation to us."
2 other generals in the main tent stood up, their faces full of anger and murderous intent. They were one of the 4 generals that Yes Hen relied on, Lei and Mu Tuer. Over the years, the War of Wara had gradually become stronger under the leadership of Yes Hen, and many outstanding generals had emerged. Among them, Bo Mu Ting Shu, Lei and Mu Tuer had the best performance. They were also known as Yeshen's 4 generals. This time there were 3 in the main tent, except for Bo Mu who was stationed in the chaotic Well City in the Hitao region. Now all 3 of them stood up and said that they couldn't let Ding Shan leave. This person was simply here to issue a letter of challenge. If they let him leave, where would the War of Wara's face go? Facing the shouts of the 3 generals, Ding Shan's expression didn't change and his heart didn't skip a beat. When he received the mission this time, he was determined to die. Would a person who was even prepared to die be afraid of being threatened in front of him?
Chapter 974.
All right, let him go.
Yes Hen wasn't prepared to fight with Yang Chendong. Even if he wanted to fight, killing one of the enemy's commanders wouldn't boost his morale. It would only make the 5-star army hate him even more. He wouldn't do such a thankless job. Ding Shan left. When he left, he swaggered. Tang Shu and the other 2 generals were furious. They looked at Yes Hen and asked unhappily, "Leader, what's so scary about the 5-star army?" They actually wanted to send food to Baiming's surrounded soldiers. They are clearly our enemies. What do you know? The 5-star army has cannons. They have powerful cannons. Unless we can kill them in one shot, any blind move is just asking for trouble. Yes Hen recalled the scene from that night. A trace of fear appeared in his heart. So what if they have cannons? The Baiming army also has cannons, but they were still defeated by us. General Tang Shu said proudly. That's not the same. Yes Hen shook his head. In his heart, Baiming's cannons were too weak. Their attack range was also very limited. It wasn't like that night. He couldn't even see where the cannons were before he was defeated. Yes Hen thought highly of the 5-star army. Another general, Lei, said unhappily, "Leader, are we just going to watch the 5-star army send food to Baiming's army? If that's the case, we will have to pay an even higher price to take down Sanbuchuan. Then what should we do? Do we have to fight against Baiming and the 5-star army at the same time? Let me ask you, if that is the case, what are your chances of winning?" He had also been angered by the questions of the other generals, so he roared back. This. Tang Shu and the others didn't say anything. They were nothing more than martial artists. If one were to look at them from a higher perspective, they were just fierce generals. When it came to scheming, they were far from it. Because of this, even though they were all capable of fighting, they still became Yeshen's subordinates. The 3 generals didn't say anything. Yes Hen waved his hand in annoyance. "All right, you guys can leave first. Let me think about it." The situation of the battle kept changing. Yeshen's mind was in a mess. First, the stubborn resistance of the Northern Ming Imperial Edict Army exceeded his expectations. He used the 100 cannons he had seized and forcefully blasted a huge hole in the western city gate of Sanbu Luchuan. Then, the armored cavalry seized the opportunity to charge in. But even so, the stubborn Northern Ming soldiers still managed to block the hole and drive back the cavalry he had sent out. The Northern Ming army's fighting strength was tyrannical, and their willpower was tenacious.
far surpassing what he had previously thought. Just based on this point, he could conclude that the commander of Beiming in Sanbuchuan was definitely not an ordinary person. This also added a lot of resistance to his original plan. When he couldn't attack the city, a second accident occurred. The 5-star army actually wanted to interfere and send food to the Beiming army. This was to completely cut off his path to attack the city. He was furious, but he couldn't do anything about it. He had long heard of the strength of the 5-star army. He didn't have the confidence to win against them in a one-on-one battle, not to mention that he might have to face the combined forces of the 5-star army and Beiming army. If that was the case, he would lose without a doubt. Forget it. It's never too late for a gentleman to take revenge. So what if they send food to the Beiming army? In the end, Sanbuchuan is still surrounded by me. When the Beiming army appears, perhaps there will be a turn for the better. Xianxia suppressed his urge to attack and finally decided to take a step back and observe the situation before making a decision. Xianxia's achievements today were all due to his personality. He was the kind of person who could adapt to circumstances. When he had the advantage, he would show his ruthless side. Just like when Tuachuo Buhua was defeated by Yang Chendong, he saw the opportunity and took a bite. In the end, he ended Tuachuo Buhua's life. On the other hand, when the situation was not good, he was very good at holding his breath. He was like a vicious wolf that lay dormant, only waiting for the right opportunity to suddenly jump up and take a fierce bite. Now, it was time for him to swallow his anger. After Ding Shan returned from delivering the letter, he went to see Yang Chendong in the beginning city and told him everything that happened when he entered the main tent of the Wara army. Yang Chendong listened attentively from the side. After Ding Shan finished speaking, he was not stingy with his praise. Then he ordered that the food could be sent. There was no news from Xianxia, so Yang Chendong decided to send the food. The commander of the new army, Tiger's Mane, was puzzled. "Young master, don't we need to wait for a reply?" "No need. Commander Ding Shan being able to come back safe and sound is enough to explain the problem." Yang Chendong chuckled. If Xianxia did not agree to the 5-star army's move, it would be difficult for Ding Shan to come back. On the other hand, it proved that the other party had misgivings, so he should take advantage of this time to send the food over. What was he waiting for? He did not forget that in a few days, the Ili army would arrive on the battlefield. At that time, the situation of the entire battlefield would change dramatically. Before that, the matter of transporting the food had to be done properly. Otherwise, it would be difficult to find another opportunity. Yang Chendong ordered, and 100 carriages were driven out from the logistics division. The Tatar division commander, Su He, personally led a division of men to escort them. This way, even if they encountered any accidents, they would not suffer any losses. Su Yozhen personally watched as the food was loaded onto the carriages. With these things, the nearly 200,000 soldiers in Beiming Sambulachuan city could eat for 2 months. At that time, the army led by Governor Shihang would arrive and the danger of Sambulachuan city would be resolved. Yang Chendong stood beside Su Yozhen. Not far away, there were a few officials from Beiming's Ministry of Revenue watching. All of this had to be recorded. When they returned, they had to report to the Beiming Imperial Court and report the details of the process. "Don't worry, there won't be any problems with the food, and no one will stop them. I have arranged for a division of cavalry to escort them. If there is a problem, more troops will quickly arrive. As long as Xianxia does not want to start a full-scale war, he will not stop them. But Brother Su, you can prepare to leave here and return to the capital to report," Yang Chendong said as he patted Su Yozhen's shoulder as he watched the carriages of food being transported out of the first city. "Okay, 6th young master, don't worry. I will go and make preparations. However, I still need Shi Wanshan to issue a receipt for the delivery of the food. When the time comes, I will arrange for officials from the Ministry of Revenue to accompany them. I hope that 6th young master can make things easy for me." Su Yozhen nodded. He knew that he had a more important task to do. After returning to Beiming, there was still a big hole to be dug for Emperor Daizong. In comparison, the matter at hand was a small matter. "This is not a problem. But I have to remind Brother Su of one thing. After returning to the capital, when Emperor Daizong personally issues an imperial edict regarding my Bugnam of Gojoseon, When can the 5 million taels of silver be withdrawn from the Beiming capital's Yang family bank?
Yang Chendong nodded and smiled. Sixth young master, don't worry. I know what to do.
Su Yozhen was very clear about his identity, especially after seeing the prosperity and power of the first city.
This time, he was completely on Xianxia's ship.
The food supplies left the first city, passed through Saihan Mountain, and reached Sanbuchuan City very smoothly. Although they would occasionally discover Wallace scouts in the distance, everything was as Yang Chendong had said.
Yes Hen did not make up his mind to act. In the end, all the food supplies were delivered to Sanbuchuan City.
The Xian Mansion's chief soldier, Shi Wanshan, personally came out of the city to welcome them. After the inspection, he issued a receipt to the officials from the Ministry of Revenue.
Su Yozhen left.
He came with a mission and left with an even more important task. At the same time, Ili led the Li Kingdom's army to the Shajing region. They arrived at Sanbuchuan City and met up with Yeshen's army of 150,000.
Apu's arrival made Yes Hen very happy.
At the very least, he now had the advantage in terms of military strength. Thus, while he assigned the Li Kingdom's army a place to stay, he invited Apu to his tent to discuss the matter of attacking Sanbuchuan City together.
Haha, Lord Prime Minister. You're finally here. What do you think? Let's do something big together. Right now, Sanbuchuan City is surrounded by my cavalry. It's so tight that not even a drop of water can get through.
Yes Hen still wanted to say something. A single sentence from Arab was enough to turn him into a mute. So tight that not even a drop of water can trickle through? If that's the case, what's up with 1,000 carriages of food that the 5-star army sent into the city?
Yes Hen was at a loss for words. He did not know how to answer.
Apu did not wait for Yes Hen to think. He said, Lord Prime Minister just said that if we work together, we can do something big.
I think that's a good idea.
Since that's the case, let's discuss how to deal with the 5-star army.
Okay.
Deal with the 5-star army.
Yes Hen nodded.
Then, he looked at Apu with a confused expression. Lord Prime Minister, you didn't hear wrong. We're going to deal with the 5-star army, Apu said confidently. Then, he strode to the map and pointed at it. Lord Prime Minister just said that Sanbuchuan City is now heavily surrounded. They have just been defeated and only have the strength to defend the city. They don't have the intention to fight outside the city. Since they're all cities, why don't we attack Shi City? That place is the #1 city in the Central Plains. There are countless resources and hundreds of thousands of slaves. If we can capture that place, I think we will get many times more than what we would get from taking down Sanbulachuan. Attack Shi City, but the 5-star army is in charge of defending it. There were also some people who hadn't understood the situation yet.
So what if they're defending it?
I've already sent people to investigate. The 5-star army only has less than 40,000 people. Compared to Wara's 150,000 cavalry, and our Ili's 170,000 infantry, 40,000 against 320,000. I'm sure everyone knows who's going to win, Apu said confidently.
Chapter 975.
This was the decision he had made along the way, which was to take down the first city and inflict heavy losses on the 5-star army. If possible, capturing the Heavenly Khan alive would be the best thing to do. And he made such a decision not only because the Ili army suffered a loss at the hands of the 5-star army, but more importantly, he valued the value of the first city and the benefits he could obtain by taking it down. A true politician would never act on loyalty. Just like how Alip would not retaliate just because Kansa lost to the 5-star army. If it were not for the abundant resources and slaves in Origin City, he would have endured the humiliation. But since he could vent his anger and obtain even more benefits, why not? Faced with Alip's bold idea, Yeshen's desire was also aroused at this moment. He had to admit that he was afraid of the 5-star army, but he was full of yearning for the first city that had already been built and played its role. If possible, if he had to choose between Sanbuchuan City and the first city, he would not even hesitate and directly choose to attack the first city.
But is this really going to work?
Yes Hen did not answer immediately, and his eyes kept turning. Seeing this, Alip laughed and said, Leader, I know what you are worried about. The 5-star army is indeed very powerful, but because of this, it is full of threats to us. If we can't defeat them with the advantage of a powerful force, then it will be even more difficult to defeat them in the future. And as long as we can take down Yang Chendong this time, there will be no one in the grassland who can threaten us. Tuachuo Hua Khan is already dead, and the Heavenly Khan is also dead. Let me ask you, who will be your opponent, Yes Hen? At that time, you will be the leader of the grassland. As your friend, we don't have any ambitions. We just want to snatch some silver and slaves back to the country to make the people's lives better. The Han people have a saying, if you don't look out for yourself, the heavens will destroy you. Since that's the case, why are you still hesitating? Take advantage of the fact that you just sold him a favor. Invite Yang Chendong out and kill him. At that time, there will be no more demons in your heart, and you will become the one and only Heavenly Khan here. Apu's ability to bewitch people was very powerful. With just a few words, Yeshen's impetuous heart was moved. His face even turned a bit red. Clearly, the benefits of victory had deeply stimulated his heart. After a while, Yeshen's expression gradually returned to normal. Then, he began to think about what kind of practical problems he would face if he did this. Prime Minister, our military strength naturally has an advantage against the first city. However, once Baiming intervenes, they have nearly 200,000 troops and will still pose a threat to us. Haha, please rest assured, Chief. On the way here, I have already sent someone to the capital of Baiming to deliver a letter and discuss this matter with their emperor. I believe that there will be news soon. At that time, this doubt will not be a problem. Perhaps the emperor of Baiming also wants to kill this loyal duke of the Great Ming that he can't control. Apu's face was full of confidence. Then we will follow the plan step by step. When the emperor of Baiming sends news, we will take action. Yes Hen finally made up his mind. Although Yang Chendong had left him with too many shadows, now that their military strength was 8 times that of the enemy, what was there to fear? Haha, good. Then let's discuss the next plan. Seeing that Yes Hen had finally made up his mind, Apu could not help but laugh with satisfaction. Baiming capital. The Imperial envoy, Su Yozhen, had yet to return. In the rear hall of the Imperial palace, Chief Eunuch Jin Ing had rushed to Zhu Qiu's chambers with an anxious expression. What has caused you to be in such a panic? Zhu Qiu walked out of the chambers of a recently concubine, his face filled with displeasure. He had originally wanted to spend some time with his beloved concubine, but now he had been disturbed. Presumably, no one would be happy. At this moment, Jin Ing did not realize that he had disturbed a good time. On the contrary, he looked left and right. After confirming that there was no one else around, he softly said, "Reporting to your Majesty, our embroidered uniform guard has captured a foreign spy in the city." What? Zhu Qiu's expression instantly turned ugly. The embroidered uniform guard has captured a spy and is about to report to us. Do you all have nothing better to do? No. Knowing that he had misspoken, Jin Ing hurriedly corrected himself. Your Majesty, this is no ordinary spy. This is a messenger sent by the Baiming Kingdom of Baiming. That person voluntarily allowed the embroidered uniform guard to discover him. He even brought a letter with him. Oh, here it is. Jin Ing carefully took out a letter from his bosom and respectfully presented it to Zhu Qiu. However, after a short while, Zhu Qiu's expression had become very grave after reading the letter. As if afraid that he had misunderstood, he picked up the letter and carefully read it again. Then, he looked up at the sky and did not speak for a long time. Jin Ing, who had already read the letter, naturally knew the significance it represented. Seeing that the emperor had not spoken for a long time, he asked tentatively, "Your Majesty, how do you think we should reply?" Who has read this letter? Zhu Qiu did not answer the question directly. Only this official has read it. The other embroidered uniform god brothers are not of high enough rank, Jin Ing replied in a very certain tone. Us understands. Just pretend that us have not seen this letter. You can arrange for the messenger to leave as soon as possible. Zhu Qiu suddenly said this without rhyme or reason. Then, he turned and walked toward the back of the palace. However, the direction was not the Imperial concubine's palace, but the Qingjing Hall. Obviously, Zhu Qiu's heart was not calm at this time. At this moment, he was no longer in the mood to talk about feelings with anyone. Looking at the emperor's back, Jin Ing nodded in understanding. He already knew what the emperor meant. That was, he had agreed to the request of the Ili army's messenger to join forces to deal with Yang Qindong. However, Zhu Qiyu had just wanted to make Yang Qindong the Bugnam of Gojoseon. It was really not good for him to go back on his word now. Therefore, he pretended not to know anything and left it to him, the chief eunuch, to handle. The three sides secretly joined forces. There were all kinds of schemes and betrayals among them. However, Yang Qindong, who was in the first city, was completely unaware of all this. He was only wondering why the Ili army suddenly did not move after they appeared. They did not intend to join forces with the Wara army to attack Senbutchuan city, nor did they intend to send troops to deal with him. As the saying goes, when things are abnormal, there must be a demon. This kind of sudden quiet situation gave Yang Qindong a very bad feeling. He did not like the feeling of not being able to control the situation. Worried, he increased the frequency of the scouts' activities in the Shaojing area. However, it was a pity that there was still no useful information coming back. The news said that the armies of the Wara army and the Ili army were seizing the time to conduct siege training. It seemed that they were preparing to take down Senbutchuan city in one fell swoop. They have more than 300,000 people. Senbutchuan city is just an isolated city. There are less than 200,000 defenders in the city. Most of them are new recruits who have just entered the battlefield. How can they be so careful? Looking at the military intelligence in front of him, Yang Qindong could only shake his head to express that he did not understand. He still did not understand. It was now the end of July. In more than 2 months, there would be heavy snow on the grasslands. At that time, whether it was outdoor warfare or logistics, it would be much more difficult. It was impossible for everyone not to understand this reasoning, but why were they not in a hurry? Just what were they waiting for? Reporting. Just as Yang Qindong was feeling puzzled, the voice of the first guard captain Qiu Vi came from outside the courtyard. Soon after, he appeared in front of Yang Qindong with a secret report in hand, handing over a telegram that had just been sent to Yang Qindong. Holding the telegram in his hand, Yang Qindong only glanced at it before suddenly standing up from his chair. His voice carried a trace of confusion as he asked, "The telegram says that Baiming's commander-in-chief Shi Hang led 200,000 reinforcements out of Juyong Pass and suddenly began to slow down. Is this news true or false? When did it happen? Immediately send Wang Shan to investigate." The news had been sent by a secret agent of the security bureau hidden near Juyong Pass. They had seen that Baiming's reinforcements had suddenly slowed down, almost stopping every now and then. Considering that Baiming was waiting for reinforcements on the front lines, this situation was very abnormal, so they had sent a telegram to inform the higher-ups. Originally, not long after the war began, Tulu City had been sealed off. Under the policy of not allowing anyone to leave or enter, no one had thought that the news would leak out, and no one had figured out what a telegram was. But no matter what, Yang Qindong still saw the telegram and understood the movements of Baiming's reinforcements. When he thought about how so much time had passed and how the allied forces of Wala and Ili had not attacked Senbutchuan, instead, the scouts had sent news that they were constantly practicing the combination of cavalry and infantry when attacking the city. For a moment, Yang Qindong could not help but wonder if their target this time was not Senbutchuan, but himself. This bold thought was just a fleeting thought, but it was accurately caught by Yang Qindong. What followed was a burst of shock and anger. Could it be that this bold thought was true? If this was the case, it was not impossible. After all, no matter how he looked at it, the benefits of taking down Shur City were far better than taking down Senbutchuan. If all of this was true, then it proved that Wala, Ili and Baiming had joined forces? Someone, go and invite Tiger's Mane, Shibi, Yangxi, and City Lord Yu Mian over. For such a big matter, even Yang Qindong could not make the right decision with just a telegram. He had to discuss it with others. You're tuning in to the Wisdom Diary YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.